Hmm. 15 minutes. When it goes to 14 minutes, I do the appropriate stuff. Okay, first and foremost. Morbush letters. Limped here. This adventure, 40 minutes. Unlock collection. Confirm. Take everyone. No. Craft. No. Awesome. Discovery. A bunch of stuff. Oh, fuck. Dog is way too loud. One. Two. Yes. Really? You know what? Hmm. Okay. And the last one. The last four. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's nice. Hmm. Can craft much more stuff. not sure if I should though. $19, 32 minutes. It's currently at 72, but it shows as if it's 75. As is, it's 75. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. A video by a channel called Clockwork. How do bacteria know the time? KC and circadian clock proteins.
No, for real, how does anyone know what time it is? Where does that, like, sense of time come from? And how is it that you always seem to get tired at, like, the exact same moment post-sunset every day? Incredibly, this is something that happens at the cell level. Our good Earth has had roughly the same day-night cycle for the entire time life has been here, just with the day getting slightly longer over time. So there's been some consistent evolutionary pressure for critters to find a way to keep track of a rough day-night cycle. You in particular have got a pretty complex network of clock proteins and cellular signals that all add up to establishing your wake-rest cycle. You might know this as your circadian rhythm. Anyone who's ever had to work a night shift or stumbled out of a predictable circadian rhythm can tell you that it is complicated to manage. Your day-night cycle relies on a whole bunch of different feedback loops. Mapping out the molecular foundations of your particular circadian rhythm can get really complicated in like a deeply unfun way, especially in a quick video like this. Luckily, for every try-hard, overcomplicated mechanism in people and other eukaryotes, there's usually a much simpler analog in bacteria that can serve as a more palatable intro to the concept. And for the last 20 years, scientists have been studying the astoundingly simple molecular clock in a common freshwater cyanobacteria. This protein, called Chi-C, works with a few other cellular mechanisms to maintain a near perfect 24-hour clock day after day, regardless of what season it is. Unpacking how Chi-C does this is a great way to learn about one of the most important fundamental reactions in biochemistry. More importantly, Chi-C deploys a borderline physical magic trick to ensure it moves slow enough to keep track of the day-night cycle with almost no errors, which is practically a miracle if you understand how fast things move at both the cellular and molecular level. And I mean, come on folks, this channel's called Clockwork. It is honestly amazing it took us this long to cover circadian clock proteins. Let's get into it. And hey, welcome back to Clockwork. This channel is all about exploring the molecular foundations of life in a way that helps you build a deeper understanding of your inner complexity and how something as incredible as your mind can emerge out of the physical and chemical laws that govern the whole universe. In particular, this exploration of circadian clock proteins is technically a continuation of our series on senses, but it's kind of a stretch to call your circadian rhythm like a time sense. Either way, subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and check out our newly revamped Patreon to see how you can keep the channel going. But let's get into the meat of the video. Where are we even going to find these simple molecular clocks? You know what? They're gonna be right here. Meet the hero.
3 days, 19 hours. 1, 2, 3. Until Sunday. Really? Really now? This one is still 7 days. Left. It's really weird that this changed up.
Hero of our story, Synechococcus elongatus, a freshwater cyanobacteria that grows really well in lab conditions, making it one of the most well-studied living things on the planet. These are the plants of the microbial world and the foundational building block of the food web basically everywhere. S. elongatus and their ancestors are the primary producers of oxygen, so you can take a quick breath and thank this little guy for hand-stitching the breathable part of the atmosphere for you, one water molecule at a time. But the main thing we're focused on is that as a critter that survives by eating sunlight, S. elongatus really needs to keep track of time to better sync up with Earth's day-night cycle. If you're like me, you might be thinking a step ahead here and asking, why does this guy even need a clock? Can't they just turn on photosynthesis when they detect light? And I hear you, but we're going to answer that question once we see how this clock works. Stick with me, we're going to do this in the right order. If we dive deep into the cytoplasm of this bacteria, we'll quickly find the subject of today's video. Meet the world's simplest circadian clock protein, Chi-C. Working together with its partners Chi-A and Chi-B, this protein keeps an incredibly consistent 24-hour clock using nothing but chemistry alone. Now, I want to start off a little technical here. Chi-C is a chemical oscillator. If you crack open any analog clock, you'll find an oscillator at the core of the mechanism that allows it to tell time. An oscillator is simply anything that changes between at least two different states at a regular time interval, like a spring rotating back and forth inside this watch, or a pendulum in a more old-school clock, or the balanced motion of this metronome. Oscillators move in roughly the same way across a precise time interval. As a protein-based oscillator, Chi-C tracks the time by changing its shape a few different times across a 24-hour period, with roughly the same shape changes happening at the same time every day. And this is critical. We'll get into why that's important later, but don't forget one of the most fundamental laws of molecular biology: structure equals function. The shape of Chi-C determines what it's going to be doing at a given time. Now, since Chi-C is an oscillator, we're going to run through this cycle 3 different times at 3 different layers of complexity, so we don't get hit with too much information at once. I honestly think you'll have an easier time digesting it this way. Let's not waste any daylight and jump right into round 1. Let's see how Chi-C and all its accessory proteins fit together at first. To start off, at hour 0, the very beginning of the cycle, a regulatory protein called Chi-A will bind to the bottom of Chi-C and kickstart the oscillator. And this is going to start a series of slow clock reactions in the core ring of Chi-C's proteins. For right now, I just want you to imagine that Chi-C is slowly tightening all day. And incredibly, Chi-C's internal clock reactions have it approaching max.
Out of 53. Which friend I invite? I'm going to be 100% honest. Yesheng seems to me like a very tragic character with self-inflicted tragedy. Stop hitting yourself, as they say. I need 4 more months of that. Remaining rewards 65 days. Less than purchasing same. Purchases. One 139 179. On 100 days, that's 34, 34, maybe 4.
Maximum tightness at round about 12 hours after this cycle starts. In fact, Kai-C is tight enough at the 12-hour mark that it actually boots Kai-A from the complex, and it's going to change its shape enough to allow our third character, Kai-B, to bind to this part of the Kai-C clock. Kai-B basically helps deactivate the tightening process here. Now, Kai-B is going to help Kai-C start loosening back towards its start state. At the same time, Kai-B is also the perfect shape to grab onto Kai-A and sequester it, preventing this fella from accidentally restarting the party too early. But sure enough, Kai-C will loosen up enough to kick Kai-B and friends off the complex roughly 24 hours after this reaction began, allowing us to start all over. Cool, right? At the simplest level, Kai-A is going to wind Kai-C up, while Kai-B helps wind the clock protein down. Simple enough. But those timings are not precise. You're gonna see why at round about level 3. Stick with me here. Before we do that though, what exactly are these clock reactions I was alluding to? It's time to get to the next level, y'all. And trust me, the biochemistry at this level is where the real meat of this video is. But let's explore that after we hear from today's sponsor, which is, plot twist, me. Today's episode is brought to you by our supporters over at patreon.com/clockworkshow. It's been a year since I relaunched this channel, and we've made a lot of progress, and we're now on the cusp of some really exciting new paths for the channel. So I'm relaunching our Patreon with a bunch of new tiers and actual rewards to make it the central hub for developing this channel moving forward. We are now going to finally have physical rewards, like a monthly handmade sticker club and 2.5D molecular papercraft prints, along with classics like a soon-to-be-launched monthly livestream and early access to a soon-to-be-launched second channel. Now, I've got a bonus video over at patreon.com/clockworkshow that anyone can watch. That video is going to explain our new tiers, and it lays out a roadmap for how we'll grow this channel over the next year. If you'd like these animations, now is the moment I would really appreciate your support so we can kick this thing into overdrive. Check out patreon.com/clockworkshow to learn more. But okay, enough business. Let's get back to the biochemistry. We're about to dive into level 2 of what makes Kai-C tick, so let's tackle some chemical fundamentals. And you know what? Let's zero in on just Kai-C for this run-through. All of those little clock reactions I mentioned earlier rely on one of the most fundamental and ubiquitous reactions in biochemistry. That's right, folks, we're talking about phosphorylation, or how your cells move energy around to keep things moving at all times. And okay, let's do a warp speed overview of phosphorylation before the less hardcore biochem folks get bored and bail. All living things consume food to get the energy they need to stay alive. In our mitochondria and in the membranes of bacteria like S. elongatus, a turbine called ATP synthase transforms food energy into this universal catalytic currency, adenosine triphosphate. And for simplicity's sake, ATP moves energy around your cells by popping off this last phosphate group at the end, turning it back into adenosine diphosphate. And one of the ways this is actually an energy transfer is that rogue phosphate group can get stuck onto a protein, forcing it to change its shape enough to change how it works or exactly who it binds with or whatever. So sure enough, getting a shiny new phosphate group attached to a protein is called phosphorylation. And this is a wildly common event that happens in cells, since ATP is constantly getting produced and distributed throughout basically all cells. For the most part, there's this ubiquitous massive family of protein workers called kinases that wander around and use ATP to phosphorylate their partner proteins. But Kai-C is incredibly cool because it phosphorylates itself. It does something called autophosphorylation. Which is a word that sounds way weirder out loud than I thought it would. But yeah, now it's time to adjust our language from level 1. Instead of Kai-C tightening and loosening, it's phosphorylating and dephosphorylating itself. Let's check out precisely how. Kai-C has this perfect little pocket down here where ATP can bond. This is the C2 domain of one subunit of Kai-C, and usually the ATP spot here is covered up and inaccessible. Kai-A binding is going to uncover the phosphorylation site, which is going to kick off this whole process. And the process here is simple enough. This domain has 2 slots that can get phosphorylated. So for the first half of this clock cycle, 2 ATP molecules are going to show up and donate phosphate groups in this order, until these ATP slots are full. Each time one of these phosphorylations happens, Chi-C's shape changes a little. Once we hit maximum phosphorylation, Chi-C's shape will change enough to boot Chi-A from the complex and allow Chi-B to bind. With Chi-A gone, these phosphorylation slots are covered up once again. And this is where we get to discover one of Chi-C's superpowers, because it can actually remove these phosphate groups by itself. It's able to reverse its own phosphorylation. I need to really hammer this home, y'all. Usually, this takes 2 separate proteins, a kinase to add a phosphate group, and a separate protein worker called a phosphatase to catalyze the release of that phosphate and deactivate the main protein. Instead, Chi-C's active site down here is so dynamic and shaped so, well, ambiguously that it can do both jobs depending on if it's Chi-A or Chi-B bound to the complex. So the loosening process here is just Chi-C gradually booting these phosphate groups off. But getting back to the actual reactions, once Chi-C is fully phosphorylated, fully tightened, Chi-B will bind and inhibit phosphorylation. Chi-C then spends the second half of the cycle pushing these phosphate groups out of the C2 domain. Sure enough, booting both of these phosphate groups from Chi-C will take roughly 12 hours. And to be real with you, the precise timing here is pretty complex and depends on a lot of factors that just don't really make for decent YouTube material, and trust me, I tried way too hard to make it work. So please, let's just put a lot of emphasis on the word roughly there and understand it's kind of a hazy range actually. And remember, Chi-B holds on to Chi-A after it binds to the complex, so that's going to guarantee that those phosphate slots will stay closed for the entire second half of this cycle. Unless Chi-C is actively being phosphorylated, it's actively working to push those phosphate groups off. Nice. But that's it. Level 2 is basically Chi-C transitioning sequentially between 4 states. Let's rotate to a top-down view so you can see this happening with all 6 of Chi-C's subunits. Once Chi-A binds, Chi-C will gradually add 1 phosphate, then a second one across 12 hours. Chi-B will then slam the door on the phosphorylation party, allowing Chi-C to gradually boot these phosphates and return to normal. And I love that we can simplify the mechanism this way, but if you're me, it's a little unsatisfying, because it is honestly wild that Chi-C somehow only shifts between 4 states across 24 hours. Because phosphorylation usually isn't even close to this slow. Like, if you've watched my video on DNA transcription, you know that RNA polymerase II can get phosphorylated dozens of times over the course of a single seconds worth of RNA production. How on earth are we going to slow down biochemistry enough to track actual daylight? Is this clock protein like tightening in billions of really small steps? Or is there something here way cooler than that? Are y'all ready to put this together and see how the full clock works? With just a little more chemistry, we can lock in a full explanation here and put this all together. Welcome to Level 3, the deep biochemistry. Now before we rotate to the next cycle, let's take a longer look at Chi-C real quick. This protein is a hexamer, which means it's built out of 6 identical subunits all connected together like this. But rotating it back to our original view, look, each subunit actually has 2 distinct biochemical domains. We pretty much ignored the top half of Chi-C until now. All of that important phosphorylation happens in the bottom half of Chi-C, the C2 domain of the protein. But the timing of those reactions is governed by the top half here, the C1 domain. Now, C1 also binds to ATP, but it doesn't phosphorylate itself. Instead, C1 is an ATPase domain. It does something called ATP hydrolysis. It just grabs some energy from splitting ATP to push the rest of Chi-C across a difficult transition. And again, how C1 does this is pretty hazy, but one proposed mechanism goes like this. Chi-C's C2 domain needs to be flexible in order for these phosphorylation reactions to happen. And Chi-C gradually becomes more flexible over time. But then, C1 fires off an ATP hydrolysis, and that burst of energy shocks the whole complex into being more rigid. In short, occasional bursts from C1 block C2 from doing its job, slowing the whole complex down so it can operate on this 24-hour timescale. And therefore, C1's little energy bursts become the quote-unquote ticking that sets the pace of this clock protein. Nice. Teams working on Chi-C have done an incredible job establishing that breaking ATP up in this C1 domain governs the pace of its elongatus circadian rhythm. But the precise how is still a little unclear. Either way, covering the basics, in normal cell conditions, C1 will snap off some ATP energy just shy of 16 times a day, like on average 15.8 times a day, and this pace is shockingly stable. There's certain circumstances where C1 will go faster or slower, but it averages out to consuming 15.8 ATP molecules per day. Mess with the C1 domain and Kai-C's phosphorylation cycle will go all out of whack. But the truly incredible thing about C1, and the part that really matters for the scope of this video, is that it's able to maintain such an incredibly slow rate of ATP hydrolysis. A similar complex, RUVB, hydrolyzes ATP around 8,000 times a day. So Kai-C isn't even in the same galaxy as proteins in its class. And that begs the question, how on earth is it able to do things so slowly? And the answer is simple. It's built in a way that it's kind of bad at its job. Let's finally get to the deep biochem and see how ATP binds to this weird little complex. Normally, when ATP is in a binding site like this, it immediately gets catalyzed to break off its last phosphate group. But this is the magic of Kai-C. This is why you stuck it out to this level of the video. This C1 domain of Kai-C is an annoyingly weak binding site for ATP. ATP enters the C1 domain just fine, but this little binding pocket just isn't perfectly set up to catalyze the hydrolysis of this reactor. So the ATP is just going to be stuck here doing nothing. And okay, I want to unpack that with the most technical 45 seconds of this entire video. I hate organic chemistry way more than you do, so let's blitz this segment before my brain actually melts. And again, if we go all the way into C1's...
You can't run! This party is just getting started! Chelsea! Adjust your breathing. You're luck to run out! Go, come on! I'm all ears. For the time field name, I will never lose! You're all riddled with pearls. A flurry of thrusts. Keep it up. Clear your mind. It's time for a surprise! You'll regret choosing me as your opponent. Look, isn't it pretty? Let's dance. You're gonna pay. Strike in an instant. You're weak. Oh, careful! Don't get scared. Need a hand? Hey, let's have some fun. Stay on offense. Behold, the most symmetrical swordplay.
Wasn't very fast.
Oh, for Lord Satan! I see it. Scatter! It's over. All right, I'll take the mark. You're done. Don't underestimate me. There's no time to lose. Oh, for Lord Satan! Let's witness the magic of music. Cut through chaos. Weakling. Who dares get between me and Lord Satan? I see it. The stage is mine. Let our souls resonate. Restore order. Cut through chaos. You're done. Don't underestimate me. Scatter. You're done. time to lose. Press forward. Oh my. Scatter! Lose yourself in the music.
Fire ether, ice resist. Look this dude.
Just when it seemed things couldn't get any worse for One Punch Man, with Season 3 Episode 6 setting a new record for the lowest rated single anime episode of all time on IMDb, accusations started flying across the internet that the following episode was made with AI, propped up by a handful of screenshots showing some bizarre errors in the animation. With the increasing prevalence of AI image generation, for all the worry about people not being able to tell when stuff is AI, and clearly that's a problem too, as it turned out, the bigger problem is actually people not being able to tell when stuff isn't AI. To be fair, I didn't find too many content creators outright stating this as a definite fact, usually hedging a little bit in their commentary.
It's hard to say.
But so many titles and thumbnails and internet comments presented the accusations as just a fact.
Many suspicious inconsistency that's confirmed they are using AI.
It may seem insignificant. Isn't this just another case of cherry-picking weird in-between frames to make fun of? Toss it in the pile. But in a time where our very perceptions of reality are being fractured and the more people believe in AI as an unknowable, unstoppable, mystical force of some kind, whether demonic or angelic, the more AI companies get to juice their stock prices.
Artificial intelligence could absolutely like all the magic tricks, all the ability to bring people back from the dead, an actual
Don't get
sex robot.
careless.
What's more virgin than a computer?
Watch out.
I think it's important to take a moment to check if something is true before repeating it. And as it turns out, it's just a little critical thinking, a pinch of animation knowledge, and unfettered access to video editing software. Every single one of these errors can be much more easily explained without jumping straight to the magic machine. And I think the real explanations are actually much more interesting. While we're at it, let's go ahead and do JC staff a favor by fixing the errors for them. And as a treat, at the end, we get to take a quick look at episode 8, which I'm told actually has some animation in it. Most of the criticisms center around a few cuts of Captain Mizuki, starting with these two frames where it looks like she has 3 boobs. You want to go through frame by frame and pick things apart in unnecessary detail? Let me show you how it's done. Sure, if you look at this single image in isolation, it looks pretty weird. But if you had just scrubbed 2 frames ahead, it would have quickly become obvious what's actually going on here. It's just bad in-between animation. If you look at the second key pose right here, there are folds in the fabric where her left breast is pulling on it and creating tension. And whoever drew these in-betweens just took this line and kept it consistent all the way through the motion, even though it should probably start from the right and extend to the left as the tension increases. And there's a slight curve when it should be straight, which is most likely just caused by rushed work and the animator having a wrist. Likewise, these shadows should probably emerge from the creases as they get deeper, but instead they've just dragged them out from the right side under the metals, which is easier to visualize, but not really how the physics should work. So instead of reacting to the motion, the crease is preempting it, and that's how you get a frame with 3 boobs. Let's go ahead and fix it for him.
There's no time to lose.
And while we're at it, let's go ahead and fix this shoulder strap too. Here's the original, and here's my fixed version. Too easy.
Literally watching the episode frame by frame.
Next up, we have this cut, where her fingers get absorbed into her chin as she runs towards the camera. This one actually does look like something that could come from AI, but all the clues are here to tell us exactly what actually happened. This run cycle is made up of the same 6 frames looped. That means that if you lay this frame on top of this one, sure enough, they're exactly identical. The only difference is that in the second one, the mouth is open. So what happened? Well, the mouth is just on a different layer, pasted over the original original drawing underneath, and they didn't take the time to cut out where the hand should be, obscuring it. In fact, you can even see a tiny little speck right here. That's the end of this line for the fingernail on the other version of the frame, so we can see exactly where the edge of this layer pasted on top is. And all we have to do to fix it is grab the fingertips from the first version and slap it right over the second. Then, to get a strong grip on the polish, we grows an extra finger. I think people latched onto this one because if you think back to the early days of AI image generation, one of the biggest and silliest problems it had was with hands and giving them the correct number of fingers. But let's actually think about this for a second. First of all, that's not actually as big a problem as it once was. And when you're rushing through an in-between frame, it's really easy to just accidentally draw one extra line. Second, there are multiple other issues with this cut that nobody seems to have even noticed, and which are obviously caused by rushed human hands. There's some sloppy line work in a few places, like on her index finger, but if this was AI, the lines wouldn't overlap like this. They would smudge and blend together. In the next frame, the top of her ear gets cut off right above the strand of hair, which can easily happen with a misclick in vector-based software. And in the next frame after that, there's a coloring area where the part of her chest below the clavicle changes into the orange color at the top. AI has no comprehension of line work and color, so it can't misclick and color a section wrong for one frame like this. Things don't pop in and out, they blend, morph, and blur. For those errors to be possible, an AI would have had to spit out these frames as unfinished cells with black outlines, blue lines for shadows, and red for highlights, only for a human to digitize and color them. And no AI can do that because that's not the data they're trained on. Let's fix this one too.
It's hard to say.
No, it's not. Bonus round while we're on hands. People also pointed out Tatsumaki's jacked up pinky in this shot, so let's fix that too, while also using our brains for a second. If I were to use AI on this cut, surely I would use it not just on the still image of the body, but also on this looping hair animation, which is clearly hand-drawn. And while we're at it, the AI would almost certainly also add some movement to the rest of her, whatever you would call this outfit, not just the collar. Finally, my main problems with this cut are the timing and spacing. There's no easing, no arcs, just straightforward frames, each one exactly halfway between the ones before and after, both spatially and temporally, and it just looks so robotic. But it also has two huge issues that people pointed out. This chain vanishes behind Mizuki's head before suddenly appearing over here, and the bandage disappears from her face. Here, figuring out which of these frames are the keyframes will tell us everything we need to know. Luckily, that's extremely easy when the pacing is so boring, like I mentioned. If we slow the clip down, it's immediately obvious that there are 5 keyframes and she moves in a straight line from one to the next. Here, 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 and here. It looks like this is all one layer until that last keyframe where it gets separated into 3. One for the majority of Mizuki, which is a still image minus the mouth movements, one for the chain, which is a 6-frame loop, and one for the moving parts of the hair, which are on a 12-frame loop. So clearly, between these last 2 keyframes, the key animator intended for the chain to move from here to here. But whether it's because the in-between animator just overlooked it, or intentionally hid the chain behind her head because it's annoyingly dense with detail, they just didn't line it up with that last keyframe. As for the bandage, that appears to be an error on the key animator's part, as it stays consistent all the way up until the last keyframe where it disappears. Again, this is the sort of thing that could happen with AI, but it wouldn't just snap out of existence like that. It would probably either get absorbed by the hair or fade into the skin. This one turned out a little sloppy, and accounting for the little camera shake is almost impossible, but I mean, look what I'm up against. If you want to help me keep making videos like this, please do all the algorithm stuff. Shares and comments are the most helpful, and if you really want to support the channel, consider literally supporting it through Patreon, where, depending on the tier, you can also get access to occasional bonus videos and stuff, your name in the credits, and see these videos 3 days early and without ads. Oh, and also there are some more coloring errors. The dark parts of her irises turn black for 2 frames, and this finger loses its shadow in the last keyframe. There are a few more little things that people pointed to as evidence of AI that are, in reality, clearly just rushed
We're gonna start Fearless. Clear it.
Hypnotic Pattern, a 3rd level illusion spell. It's basically an upgraded form of the sleep spell that isn't capped by enemy hit points. Affects a 30-foot cube, anyone within must save versus staring gormlessly at the pretty pattern until the spell ends. But here's the thing, that actually includes you if you're in the cube. Nothing says you don't charm yourself, and you need line of sight to the origin, so you will see the pattern. Though you'd stop concentrating upon being incapacitated, ending the spell. Which begs the question, can enchanters charm themselves with Charm Person? What does that feel like? While charmed, you can no longer harm yourself and have advantage to interact with, well, yourself, socially. And like, could you use Suggestion or Dominate Person on yourself as an infinite willpower hack? Imagine just being able to do whatever chores you needed to do that day by telling yourself you needed to do them under Dominate Person. Life hack? Hypnotic Pattern, a third-level illusion spell. It's basically an upgraded form of the sleep spell that isn't capped by enemy hit points. Affects a 30-foot cube, anyone within must save versus staring gormlessly at the pretty pattern until the spell ends. But here's the thing, that actually includes you if you're in the...
So I work out, and then I go to shower before the stream, and there was no hot water for some reason. Anywho, it was so, like, cold that I couldn't continue with my shower. I got out of the shower, like, wet and vulnerable, and I beelined to my kitchen to text my dad because I was charging my phone on the counter. I hear footsteps inching closer, and I'm like, that's it. My dad's so considerate. I talked to him this morning, and he knows I have a stream today, so I was like, oh my god, amazing. I let my guard down because I assume he's gonna knock. The door flies open because I forgot to lock the door. Yuppie immediately starts like barking her head off, and I whip my head around and I make eye contact with some random man I've never met before. And then he like blurts out a huge apology and closes the door, like slams it. He saw my whole butt hanging out. I call my dad again, and it turns out he had a guest over. I am never working out, and I am never showering ever again. So I work out, and then I go to shower.
Yeah. And I do now. I don't want to do anything. I'm way too fucking tired.
Alice is getting a rerun, James getting a free skin, Grace and Bernie is getting some buffs for the next version. Not to mention that the new disc set, clearly made for the idols in the 2.6, is clearly made for Anomaly. So I'm pretty sure that starting in the version 2.6, Anomaly is probably going to get some attention. So why not make an updated guide for the best and only A-rank Anomaly unit in the game? We're going to be talking about Piper. Everything that you need to know is going to be here in this quick guide, and the timestamps are down in the video, so feel free to jump around in case you're looking for specific information. Piper is still insanely good, especially for an A-rank option. I still use her to clear endgame content, and much more than Jane, to be honest. The reason for this is simply because Piper has insane build-up. This makes her an amazing option whenever you're trying to play around disorders. She's not good as a hyper carry.
Man, I really have a fucking bad problem with my leg currently. I'm not sure what to do about it. Maybe taking a bath would be a nice idea. A hot bath. Yeah, that would be fucking nice. That would be really nice. Okay, so I got another level in her. These nuts. As I've previously shown, this artifact pretty fucking nice. Look at that. No reason to reshape it. Should I even try? No damage bonus. Plunder. This one is really nice. This set only works for 2 characters so far. Actually more, but of the ones I consider Emily and Ganyu. Hey.
Hurry up, Grassa! Yeah! Huh.
What the fuck?
Time to roll! Huh. Charge! Yeah! Headbutt! Charge! Yeah!
Bow your head.
Why me? Heads up! Running late again. Hurry up, Grassa!
That's not. The expedition reward.
Pocket just isn't perfectly.
Okay, let's for a moment. Okay, currently power percent, CPU power, CPU usage, clock, phone speed, 40%. That's the
Strength
CPU.
is one of those things where you gotta use it or lose it.
Oh,
So,
CPU
wanna train with me
usage at
sometime?
100%. Or like 80%. No, that's auto tune. 72% CPU. From what I understand, my CPU is the thing that currently makes my PC loud. Relatively loud. Oh yeah, 100% CPU load. 98%. Everything load. Firefox 52%. No idea what is taking up. Oh, that's Sankaku complex. What? CPU power. Maybe some extensions.
My parents always say, no matter how
Or
busy life
something.
gets, you should always sit down and enjoy a proper meal when you get hungry. What I like to do is stack my plate up high, then squash it all down, add astra.
Set up to catalyze the hydrolysis of this reaction. So the ATP is just going to be stuck here.
Maybe when it
That
comes
way,
to
I get to
clockwork,
eat
I
my
should
fill without
start
wasting too much time.
somewhere more basic. Physics for the birds.
Phosphate group. But this is the magic of Kai-C. This is why you stuck it out.
There's a lot that goes into managing an orchard. Watering, weeding, fertilizing the soil, making sure the temperature is right. But most importantly, you have to keep the fruit in a good mood.
I'm heading east. Don't you with you.
Okay, so clockwork videos.
Get a guide if you're not familiar with the area. Interfere with the mixing process if you don't keep your voice down.
5 years ago. God resumed training blood chemistry. 5 years ago. 4 years ago, 4 years ago. And then a 3-year gap.
My parents always say, no matter how busy life gets, you should always sit down and enjoy a proper meal when you get hungry.
Okay, quick recap. You breathe the
What I
air
like to do
because
is stack
you
my
need
plate up high, then squash it all down. Take a deep breath. And hold it
Okay,
down
quick
in one
recap.
go.
You breathe air because you need oxygen to stay alive. That oxygen enters through your lungs and gets distributed all throughout your body. You need oxygen on a cellular level so your cells can use it to turn food into energy and carbon dioxide as a waste product. Oxygen gets to every corner of your body by way of your blood and red blood cells. Sure, your blood does a lot more than that, but the primary job is to get oxygen to your cells and carbon dioxide out of them. Pretty much everyone knows how this works up to this level, but that leaves a pretty big question for us. How does your blood, know where to drop off that oxygen? The answer is a little bit complex and a lot of bit fascinating. To unpack this process, we're going to have to look not at your blood cells, but at this chemical inside them, hemoglobin. The symmetry and the structure and function of this goofy-looking bundle of polypeptides is responsible for so much that keeps you alive and high-functioning every single day. Discovering how hemoglobin transports oxygen is the singular, beautiful fact that made me fall in love with biology forever. And over the next few minutes, we're going to explore it together. Hemoglobin is a protein, which means it's made of the same stuff your cells, hair, and muscles are. Proteins are pretty much the most important thing your cells produce as they go about the millisecond by millisecond business of keeping you alive, but you knew that. Specifically, hemoglobin is a tetramer protein made up of 4 subunits. These 4 puzzle pieces are mostly made up of a kind of structure called an alpha helix. The way those helixes are put together is pretty important, but we're going to get to that in a minute. The real star of the show here is embedded in all 4 of those subunits, the heme group. Here you've got a big, beautiful iron atom with just enough structural lattice attached to it to allow it to glom on to the rest of these globin proteins. That iron is ultimately what oxygen attaches to. It's also what turns your blood red. But the heme group isn't the whole story. The shape of the rest of these globin proteins is what really makes this work. Because hemoglobin rules at carrying oxygen due to the fact that hemoglobin is kinda actually terrible at binding to oxygen, at least compared to other molecules. Specifically, myoglobin, found in your muscles, is awesome at sucking up oxygen and terrible at giving it up. That makes it a great place to store the oxygen you breathe. But to get oxygen transported all throughout your body, hemoglobin needs the ability to let go of it as well. And the way this happens is wild. But we gotta cover one more thing before we get there. Like I said, hemoglobin is primarily made up of these protein chains, and scientists weren't being cute when they called them chains either. When your cells make proteins like this, it puts them together one link at a time, one molecule at a time, in a chain. You've got 21 possible links called amino acids, each with their own little flavor, their own little way of bending the chain. Some are electrically charged, some are hydrophobic, and so on. Little by little, the chain bends as you add new links, and with enough length, these proteins bend into really complex 3D shapes. Those shapes are precise, and they determine how that protein works. That's one of the #1 mantras you're going to hear in biology. Structure equals function. There are a lot of these tiny, weak, little electrochemical interactions that give proteins their shape. One of the more fundamental ones for hemoglobin's curly helix structure is the hydrogen bond, an interaction between hydrogen and oxygen molecules in an atom. You've already seen how hydrogen bonds work because of water. For a quick refresh, hydrogen bonds are responsible for why water behaves the way it does. Water beads up like this because of how strong the hydrogen bonds between each little water molecule are. Alone, these interactions are weak, but in aggregate, they're really strong. Unless an outside force acts on them, I mean. They aren't as rock solid as regular chemical bonds. And this is the cool part, and this is why I brought it up in the first place. Because there are so many different flavors of these little attractions, some proteins are a little flexible. They get tense and relax and warp depending on the conditions. If it gets a little too hot or cold, the protein changes shape. If they get exposed to a little acid or a little alkali, same story. The shape changes, the function changes. Never forget, structure equals function. Life requires really specific conditions to work. That's why your body is constantly hustling to keep you at a certain specific temperature range and your insides at a certain set of pH conditions. And those conditions affect how well hemoglobin binds to oxygen. So, finally back to how hemoglobin is so good at both picking up and dropping off oxygen. This starts to be incredible because hemoglobin is at its most relaxed and it's most able to pick up oxygen when it's in an environment that is extremely full of oxygen, where the oxygen concentration is super high. There's only one place in your body where the oxygen concentration is maxed out. You want to take a guess? It's in your lungs, right after you've taken a big breath of fresh air. And hemoglobin is at its worst state. It's least likely to bind with oxygen in an area where the pH of your blood is more acidic, where the pH is a little lower. So where does that happen? Another quick recap. You breathe in oxygen, and you breathe out carbon dioxide, because in your cells, using oxygen to turn food into energy leaves carbon dioxide as a byproduct, an actually kind of toxic one. That's why you have to get rid of it. As your cells use up the oxygen they have, CO2 builds up. When oxygen goes down, CO2 goes up. That CO2 gets really concentrated in those cells and the blood around them. And here's the crazy thing. As the concentration of CO2 in your cells goes up, enzymes in your blood break it down into carbonic acid, lowering the pH. Do you see where I'm going with this? Hemoglobin gets super tense in areas where pH is lower. Its shape changes just enough that it's actually terrible at binding with oxygen. So hemoglobin lets it go. Even better, in this state, hemoglobin is way better at binding with stuff that carbon dioxide is made out of. So oxygen leaves, and CO2 joins the party. Wherever your body needs oxygen, there is a buildup of CO2, and hemoglobin is fine-tuned to release oxygen in places where there's too much carbon dioxide. That's what's incredible about this. Hemoglobin isn't some magic bean. Your blood doesn't know where to drop off oxygen. Instead, the process is a consequence of incredibly precise interactions, astonishingly focused design. Every single little chemical reaction that happens in your body has a purpose, and they all add up to keep you alive, to keep you moving, to keep you doing everything that you do. Once you understand this, you start seeing these interactions everywhere. Knowing this is the foundation of the wonder I feel for the world. Life isn't magic, life isn't inscrutable. With a scientific method and a few hundred years of collective knowledge, you begin to understand one thing. Life just works. That's the answer at the core of every question you ask in biology class. It's figuring out the how and the why life works at the chemical level that's really fascinating. And hemoglobin is just one small example of that. Thank you. Fascinating. To unpack this process, we're going to have to look not at your blood cells, but at this chemical inside them, hemoglobin. The symmetry and the structure and function of this goofy-looking bundle of polypeptides is responsible for so much that keeps you alive and high-functioning every single day. Discovering how hemoglobin transports oxygen is the singular, beautiful fact that made me fall in love with biology forever. And over the next few minutes, we're going to explore it together. So let's roll with the basics. Hemoglobin is a protein, which means it's made of the same stuff your cells, hair, and muscles are. Proteins are pretty much the most important thing your cells produce as they go about the millisecond by millisecond business of keeping you alive, but you knew that. Specifically, hemoglobin is a tetramer protein made up of 4 subunits. These 4 puzzle pieces are mostly made up of a kind of structure called an alpha helix. The way those helixes are put together is pretty important, but we're going to get to that in a minute. The real star of the show here is embedded in all 4 of those subunits, the heme group. Here you've got a big, beautiful iron atom with just enough structural lattice attached to it to allow it to glom on to the rest of these globin proteins. That iron is ultimately what oxygen attaches to. It's also what turns your blood red. But the heme group isn't the whole story. The shape of the rest of these globin proteins is what really makes this work. Because hemoglobin rules at carrying oxygen due to the fact that hemoglobin is kinda actually terrible at binding to oxygen, at least compared to other molecules. Specifically, myoglobin, found in your muscles, is awesome at sucking up oxygen and terrible at giving it up. That makes it a great place to store the oxygen you breathe. But to get oxygen transported all throughout your body, hemoglobin needs the ability to let go of it as well. And the way this happens is wild. But we gotta cover one more thing before we get there. Like I said, hemoglobin is primarily made up of these protein chains, and scientists weren't being cute when they called them chains either. When your cells make proteins like this, it puts them together one link at a time, one molecule at a time, in a chain. You've got 21 possible links called amino acids, each with their own little flavor, their own little way of bending the chain. Some are electrically charged, some are hydrophobic, and so on. Little by little, the chain bends as you add new links, and with enough length, these proteins bend into really complex 3D shapes. Those shapes are precise, and they determine how that protein works. That's one of the #1 mantras you're going to hear in biology. Structure equals function. There are a lot of these tiny, weak, little electrochemical interactions that give proteins their shape. One of the more fundamental ones for hemoglobin's curly helix structure is the hydrogen bond, an interaction between hydrogen and oxygen molecules in an atom. You've already seen how hydrogen bonds work because of water. For a quick refresh, hydrogen bonds are responsible for why water behaves the way it does. Water beads up like this because of how strong the hydrogen bonds between each little water molecule are. Alone, these interactions are weak, but in aggregate, they're really strong. Unless an outside force acts on them, I mean. They aren't as rock solid as regular chemical bonds. And this is the cool part, and this is why I brought it up in the first place. Because there are so many different flavors of these little attractions, some proteins are a little flexible. They get tense and relax and warp depending on the conditions. If it gets a little too hot or cold, the protein changes shape. If they get exposed to a little acid or a little alkali, same story. The shape changes, the function changes. Never forget, structure equals function. Life requires really specific conditions to work. That's why your body is constantly hustling to keep you at a certain specific temperature range and your insides at a certain set of pH conditions. And those conditions affect how well hemoglobin binds to oxygen. So, finally back to how hemoglobin is so good at both picking up and dropping off oxygen. This starts to be incredible because hemoglobin is at its most relaxed and it's most able to pick up oxygen when it's in an environment that is extremely full of oxygen, where the oxygen concentration is super high. There's only one place in your body where the oxygen concentration is maxed out. You want to take a guess? It's in your lungs, right after you've taken a big breath of fresh air. And hemoglobin is at its worst state. It's least likely to bind with oxygen in an area where the pH of your blood is more acidic, where the pH is a little lower. So where does that happen? Another quick recap. You breathe in oxygen, And you breathe out carbon dioxide, because in your cells, using oxygen to turn food into energy leaves carbon dioxide as a byproduct, an actually kind of toxic one. That's why you have to get rid of it. As your cells use up the oxygen they have, CO2 builds up. When oxygen goes down, CO2 goes up. That CO2 gets really concentrated in those cells and the blood around them. And here's the crazy thing. As the concentration of CO2 in your cells goes up, enzymes in your blood break it down into carbonic acid, lowering the pH. You see where I'm going with this? Hemoglobin gets super tense in areas where pH is lower. Its shape changes just enough that it's actually terrible at binding with oxygen. So hemoglobin lets it go. Even better, in this state, hemoglobin is way better at binding with stuff that carbon dioxide is made out of. So oxygen leaves and CO2 joins the party. Wherever your body needs oxygen, there is a buildup of CO2, and hemoglobin is fine-tuned to release oxygen in places where there's too much carbon dioxide. That's what's incredible about this. Hemoglobin isn't some magic bean. Your blood doesn't know where to drop off oxygen. Instead, the process is a consequence of incredibly precise interactions, astonishingly focused design. Every single little chemical reaction that happens in your body has a purpose, and they all add up to keep you alive, to keep you moving, to keep you doing everything that you do. Once you understand this, you start seeing these interactions everywhere. Knowing this is the foundation of the wonder I feel for the world. Life isn't magic, life isn't inscrutable. With the scientific method and a few hundred years of collective knowledge, you begin to understand one thing. Life just works. And that's the answer at the core of every question you ask in biology class. It's figuring out the how and the why life works at the chemical level that's really fascinating. And hemoglobin is just one small example of that. Thank you.
What a place.
Days. 9 days. 18 days. More than enough time. Come on.
Time to roll. By royal hands where I can see 'em. Eat this! Headbutt! Hi! Yeah! Oof! Hero incoming! Yeah! Shadow! Final warning! You asked for it! Nice and spicy! Headbutt! Hi!
Shoros is top level character.
Bring it!
Let me weave you a verb.
Booba, get them!
Rain outlines your fate. Witness.
You're toast!
Yes, you are. Qualified after all.
Bring it! Yep.
Incinerate! No, my sword! Grain cutter!
Inadmissible evidence!
Let me weave you a...
Boom boom! Time for your arraignment!
Rain outlines your fate. Rain cutter.
Quick as a flash!
breathing. Let's move! Ha! Teamwork is dream. Stop right there! Hands where I can see!
Mighty mythical beast!
Coach will take it from here. Faster, stronger.
On, drop your weapons! Justice will prevent. Let's light it up! I'm going in!
Many happy returns!
Surprise! Let the magic begin!
Ha! Teamwork is dream.
The night is cold, cold. Mine's...
Mighty mythical beast! Congratulations!
I'm going in!
Step on up! Be amazed! Stars, shine for me.
Let's light it up! Yeah! Ha!
Surprise! Don't be scared. Cue the spotlight! Over here!
Everybody stand!
Up to it, Manzai! Alley-oop!
You might want to get examined.
I'm heading
This is actually pretty good for Varese. That's also nice.
Strength is one of those things where you gotta use it or lose it. So, wanna train with me sometime? My parents always say, no matter how busy life gets, you should always sit down and enjoy a proper meal when you get hungry. What I like to do is stack my plate up high, then squash it all down, take a deep breath, and wolf it down. Strength is one of those things where you gotta use it or lose it. So, wanna train with me sometime? Controlled breathing. Start the clock. Smash and grab. I'm gonna hand it out. My debts
Come on.
are settled.
Okay! New life!
Quick as a flash. On my mark. Justice o'clock. My parents always say, no matter how busy life gets, you should always sit down and enjoy a proper meal when you get hungry. What I like to do is stack my plate up high, then squash it all down, take a deep breath, and wolf it down in one go. Hurry up, Brassa! Kapow! It's justice o'clock! Yeah! Start the clock! Still couldn't get away. This is infuriating! Hero incoming! Yeah! Yeah! Hero incoming! My strength is gone. People seem to think I was born with super strength, but look at me. This tiny frame is what my genetics gave me. All my strength comes from consistent training with good technique. Put in the same work, and you can absolutely get the same results.
My head fucking hurts. Oh my god. I've gone a little over my calorie budget so far. Need to rethink my dinner plans to get back on track. On my mark!
Turning point in.
Headbutt! Hero incoming!
What a waste of time!
Controlled breathing! Start the clock!
Stay back! A turning point in.
Yeah, heads up! It's justice o'clock! It's justice o'clock!
Took too long.
I want you to imagine it's June 2021 and my friend sees me playing Fire Emblem Heroes. So he goes, "Oh, you like gacha games? You should play Genshin Impact." I thought about it for a second, then I took a look at those gacha odds and said nope. But then I saw Mona and I folded immediately. I'm glad I did because I got to experience some truly incredible moments that made me love this game. Genshin was not my first gacha game, and it wouldn't be my last. I've taken breaks from it and have enjoyed other games, but there's something about the world and characters that just resonate with me. There were so many moments in Genshin's history that were special, and now it's kind of nostalgic to look back on. I want to talk about those special moments and why they were so pivotal for growing and maintaining a fan base. These are the moments that made me fall in love with Genshin Impact. If you want to talk about strong character moments, we have to talk about Furina's 500 Years of Suffering. This scene was the best part of the Fontaine arc, and in
Strength is one of those things where you gotta use it or lose it. So, wanna train with me sometime?
Пам-пам. Я докажу вам, что это лучший год в истории. Да, к праздникам мы все устали, экономика не радует, внутренняя и внешняя политика не приносит долгожданных новостей о мире, дружбе, свободе, минимальном безусловном доходе. Но что если проблема в том, как работает наш мозг, который обращает больше внимания на негатив? Что если виноваты СМИ и алгоритмы социальных сетей, которые специально подсовывают нам только негатив? И что если я тоже в этом виноват, потому что весь год держал вас в курсе актуальных новостей, в том числе негативных. Но ведь в реальности было много хорошего, и вот давайте об этом вспомним в конце года. Привет, я Руслан Усачев, и сегодня мы поговорим о самых добрых, позитивных и радующих новостях и событиях в России и мире за 2025 год. Пам-пам. Ну и раз я уже упомянул геополитику, давайте вот с этих тем и начнем. В августе в США Дональд Трамп посадил за стол Пашиняна и Алиева, глав Армении и Азербайджана, чтобы они подписали декларацию о мирных отношениях. Это очень важный шаг в урегулировании конфликта в Нагорном Карабахе, которому уже лет 30. Вот. С распада СССР это тянется, до этого все было просто не так публично. В тексте документа страны признали необходимость продолжения дополнительных шагов для подписания соглашения, а также подчеркнули важность обеспечения и укрепления мира между странами. Эту ачивку миротворец Трамп поставил рядом с грамотой за окончание войны между Израилем и сектором Газа. 10 октября 2025 года, согласно подписанному соглашению, Израиль и Хамас прекратили боевые действия. Последние заложники были возвращены, и начались уже более спокойные действия и попытки понять, как вообще жить дальше в этом регионе. Главное, что горячая фаза войны, которая длилась 2 последних года, закончилась. Сюда же добавляем конфликт Индии и Пакистана в Кашмире, тоже закончился перемирием. Да, я понимаю, что вы возразите, что есть еще одна кое-какая война, которая тянется 4 года. Но с осторожным оптимизмом давайте все признаем, что как будто и на этом направлении из-за туч начала проглядывать какая-то надежда на перемирие. Оно вообще немного странно получается, если задуматься. Чтобы радоваться новостям о перемирии и прекращении огня где-то на планете, надо, чтобы этот огонь сначала кто-то открыл. Как-то вот двояко выходит. Пам-пам. Но смотрите, мало того, что у нас получилось где-то меньше убивать людей, в этом году были большие успехи с тем, чтобы больше людей лечить. Для начала база. Вообще исторически самый эффективный способ повысить среднюю продолжительность жизни — это сократить детскую смертность. Ведь когда говорят о том, что в древние времена люди в среднем жили 30 лет, это не значит, что стариков там не было. Потому что, а как же тогда практически любой древний человек, про которого мы слышали, известный правитель, философ тех времен? На средний возраст влияет то, что очень многие умирали в младенчестве и портили статистику. И как раз в этом вопросе мы, человечество, двигаемся в позитивном направлении. Глобальный уровень смертности детей в возрасте до 5 лет снизился на 52% с 2000 года. В этом году ЮНИСЕФ опубликовали объемный доклад по этой теме. В 2000 году они фиксировали 77 смертей на 1000 живорожденных. Сейчас показатели в 2 раза ниже, не в 2 раза меньше живорожденных, вы поняли, смертность ниже. Если бы уровень смертности остался на уровне 2000 года, на данный момент умерло бы на 95 миллионов детей больше. Все эти позитивные успехи — это благодаря совместным усилиям доноров, медиков, правительств и разных местных НКО. Помимо этого были достигнуты в этом году большие успехи в борьбе с конкретными заболеваниями. Терапевтическая вакцина от меланомы, одного из видов рака кожи, станет доступна первым пациентам уже в начале 2026 года. Это российская разработка, и Министерство здравоохранения дало разрешение на применение сразу 2 онковакцин. В борьбе против меланомы объединились несколько научных центров Минздрава. Научный исследовательский центр эпидемиологии и микробиологии имени Гамалеи, научный медицинский исследовательский центр радиологии и научный медицинский исследовательский центр онкологии имени Блохина. Эти ребята борются с меланомой, а в то же время Федеральный научно-клинический центр специализированных видов медицинской помощи и медицинских технологий Федерального медицинско-биологического агентства России мог бы себе покороче название придумать. Но пока вместо нейминга они больше преуспели в разработке пептидной вакцины Онкопепт против колоректального рака. И это именно что терапевтические препараты, они не для профилактики, а для лечения уже присутствующего рака в организме. Также медикам удалось достичь другой долгожданной цели. Генная терапия успешно замедлила прогрессирование болезни Хантингтона на 75% в ходе клинических испытаний. Этот прорыв дает надежду десяткам тысяч людей, которые страдают от этого разрушительного наследственного заболевания. Оно постепенно уничтожает клетки головного мозга, ухудшает двигательные функции, когнитивные способности и поведение. Да, это не прям полное излечение, а замедление хода болезни. Но очень значительное. Тот урон, который заболевание обычно наносило за год, теперь произойдет за 4 года. Это значит, что если успеть выявить болезнь и начать лечение, то человек получит несколько десятилетий нормальной жизни. При этом еще важно понимать, что до объявления результатов исследований в сентябре этого года в принципе не существовало лечения, способного замедлить или остановить прогрессирование этой болезни. Также была разработана и успешно применена терапия рассеянного склероза. Эмили Хендерс, 37-летняя учительница биологии из Великобритании, в октябре стала первой пациенткой, получившей иммунотерапию рассеянного склероза. И эксперты считают, что такое лечение поможет замедлить или даже остановить прогрессирование заболевания. А в Южной Корее нашли возможное решение проблем с памятью после COVID-19. Но я забыл какое. Супербактерии. Если вы знаете, что означает этот термин, то, скорее всего, даже не сильно там переживаете из-за каких-то войн или эпидемий вируса, ведь нас по итогу все равно обязательно уничтожат потом бактерии с иммунитетом к любым антибиотикам. Супербактерии. Но в этом году появилась надежда в борьбе с ними. В начале года в образце почвы в Канаде был обнаружен первый почти за 30 лет новый класс антибиотиков. Лариоцидин, он так называется, имеет другую структуру и действует иначе, чем все известные до этого антибиотики. А это значит, что он может быть более эффективен в борьбе против супербактерий, потому что у них нет иммунитета к нему, как к другим антибиотикам, а значит, можно будет разработать новую линейку антибиотиков, спасти миллионы жизней. К стоматологам можно будет ходить реже, потому что ученые из Ноттингемского университета разработали гель, способный восстанавливать и регенерировать поврежденную зубную эмаль. Там специальное белковое вещество действует как каркас, использует ионы кальция и фосфата из слюны для создания нового минерального слоя. Если клинические испытания пройдут успешно, то материал можно будет использовать вместо пломб. Хотя не знаю, можно ли это считать хорошей новостью для стоматологов, если у них по итогу работы меньше станет. Пам-пам. Я думал, нужен ли здесь сегмент, где я буду какие-то свои личные хорошие новости рассказывать. Но по правде сказать, это не был какой-то прям выдающийся у меня год, когда со своими светлыми моментами я не жалуюсь. Но, наверное, самая лучшая новость для меня, самая хорошая, это вот мое простое блогерское счастье, что вы все еще подписываетесь на канал, реагируете на мои посты, заказываете вкуснейший чай «Пора заварить», пропитанный соком ананаса и маракуйи. Некоторые даже говорят, что ссылки можно найти в описании. Да и вообще продолжайте смотреть, несмотря на то, как усердно и постоянно вставляют палки в колеса независимых авторов. Спасибо вам. А еще я подумал, что у меня, конечно, сегодня получилось собрать достаточно много хороших новостей, которые я еще дальше буду рассказывать. Но я же по-любому что-то пропустил. Вот, смотрите, вы занимаетесь самыми разнообразными профессиями. Живете разные жизни. Так поделитесь в комментариях, что хорошего у вас произошло. Может быть, в личном плане, может быть, в вашей сфере деятельности. Давайте вместе тут соберем все хорошие новости. Пам-пам. Я также понимаю, что немного эгоистично думать только о нас самих, о людях. Мир же куда больше. У животных, у природы тоже в целом был неплохой год. В одной только России восстановили сразу популяцию 3 хищников. Находившиеся на грани вымирания и занесенные в Красную книгу амурский тигр, дальневосточный леопард и снежный барс теперь в относительной безопасности. Это, естественно, не прямо вот в этом году произошло. Длительная работа по восстановлению популяции, которая заняла несколько лет, но она завершилась успехом. Тигров нарожали. В то же время в Австралии была одобрена вакцина для защиты находящейся под угрозой исчезновения популяции местных коал. Вакцина от смертельной эпидемии хламидиоза. Вот чем болеют коалы, если вы не знали. хламидиуме. Хламидиоз, который передался от европейского скота еще в 18 веке, на данный момент в ответе за половину смертей среди коал. И вот сейчас ученые придумали вакцину, которая с одного укола защищает животных, и наконец-то австралийские коалы смогут спокойно спать с европейским скотом. Также неплохо себя чувствует аксолотль. Одно из самых редких в мире земноводных, процветает после выпуска в восстановленные искусственные водно-болотные угодья недалеко от Мехико. Мексиканцы в принципе очень любят это животное, они даже стараются особо не тратить купюры, на которых оно изображено. И в общем восстановили там они эти болота. И чтобы понять, как новое место жительства, ученые установили радиомаяки на 18 выращенных в неволе аксолотлей. И оказалось, что хорошо они себя чувствуют, нормально там питаются, вес набирают, кайфуют. Это исследование говорит о том, что есть надежда на восстановление популяции в озере Хочимилько. Это единственный сохранившийся естественный ареал обитания этого животного. Амстердам продолжает отстаивать звание населенного пункта с самой комфортной городской средой. И теперь не только для людей. Там начали строить крошечные деревянные лестницы вдоль берегов каналов, чтобы кошки и другие животные могли выбраться, если упадут в воду. На такой городской проект решили выделить почти 90 тысяч евро, потому что за 6 месяцев утонуло 19 кошек. Решили остановить это. Ну и, возможно, лучшая новость в этом сегменте тоже из России. Ученые из Кабардино-Балкарского государственного университета имени Бербекова впервые за 108 лет обнаружили в республике степного толстуна. Смотрите, степной толстун, во-первых, это теперь мое любимое обзывательство. А во-вторых, это редчайшее насекомое, которое считалось исчезнувшим. Вот так оно выглядит. Его называют еще непрыгающим кузнечиком. Последний раз достоверное упоминание о нем было еще в 1917 году. С тех пор степные толстуны пропали. И вот только в этом году наконец-то смогли их найти. Они просто не прыгали, их незаметно было в траве. Я рад за толстуна. Пам-пам. В отдельный сегмент вынесу новости экологии, потому что мы как-то привыкли к тому, что человечество только засирает планету, но есть и в этом поле успехи. Успехи в том, чтобы чуть меньше засирать планету. Например, можно порадоваться тому, что Сахалинская область стала первым в России углеродно-нейтральным регионом. То есть поглощение природных газов превышает их выброс. В регионе проводится эксперимент, в котором участвуют 35 крупных компаний, которым в период до 2028 года выдали лимиты по выбросам. Если перебрал квоты, платишь штраф. А если уложился, то получаешь единицы выполнения квоты, которую потом можно продать или в будущем использовать. То есть параллельно с сокращением выбросов еще выстраивается целый рынок по торговле вот этими единицами квот. В апреле уже была первая сделка. Водоканал местный купил эти единицы квот, 384 штуки у Сахалинэнерго. При этом с Сахалином-то не ограничиваются достижения экологии. Вообще возобновляемые источники энергии впервые обогнали уголь и стали ведущим мировым источником электроэнергии. Тут тоже Китай возглавил этот процесс. Он увеличил мощность возобновляемых источников энергии больше, чем весь остальной мир вместе взятый. И вот теперь, благодаря таким достижениям и плюс к этому инициативе уже покойного Папы Римского, Ватикан себя полностью обеспечивает возобновляемой энергией. Да, это самое маленькое государство в мире, но большой пример для остальных. Теперь лампочки в кельях священников работают от солнечной энергии, которая получается на специальном энергетическом центре, который построен на принадлежащей Ватикану земле недалеко от Рима. То есть они не сам Ватикан, конечно, обклеили солнечными панелями, просто вот там в другом месте собирают, себе перетягивают. И теперь это государство присоединяется к элитному клубу из еще 7 стран, которые берут 100% своей энергии из возобновляемых источников. Это Албания, Бутан, Демократическая Республика Конго, Эфиопия, Исландия, закончились пальцы, Непал и Парагвай. А согласно данным европейских космических ученых, озоновая дыра над Антарктидой в этом году стала самой маленькой с 2019 года. В сентябре размер дыры в этом солнечном щите Земли достиг максимального значения в 21 миллион квадратных километров. Это значительно меньше, чем 26 миллионов квадратных километров, которые были в 2023 году. Мне, признаюсь, сложно визуализировать такие площади, как 21 миллион квадратных километров, 26 миллионов квадратных километров, но я как-то базово чувствую, что хорошо, когда дыры уменьшаются. Еще и вырубка лесов сокращается. Согласно данным ООН, темпы глобального обезлесивания снижаются уже третье десятилетие подряд. В 90-х вырубили 170 тысяч квадратных километров. За последние 10 лет всего 109 тысяч квадратных километров. Суммарно с 90-го года, конечно, было утрачено 5 миллионов квадратных километров лесов, но меры по их защите усиливаются. На данный момент под защитой находится 5-я часть всех лесов на планете. И они постоянно туда еще добавляют новые участки. Ну и, наверное, еще из мелочей, в июле река Сена, которая в том числе протекает через Париж, впервые более чем за 100 лет вновь открылась для купания. После очистки реки, которую проводили к Олимпийским играм, она стоила почти 1,5 миллиарда евро, решили, что все-таки можно и дать другим покупаться. Там, правда, было ограничение по числу людей, которые ежедневно на бесплатной основе пускали искупаться в Сене. Пам-пам. Путешествовать тоже стало легче. Да, не дешевле, и прямые рейсы из России все еще не восстановили. Не все сразу. Зато мы получили долгожданный безвизовый режим с Китаем. Это сейчас одна...
From that day forth, the high windows shone through the night as the dragon led the hero to patrol the cosmic shore. Starlight was their cloak, and friendship the compass that led their way.
Дата.
Одна из самых интересных стран для посещения. У нас в travel-агентстве «Пора» с самого начала были большие планы по турам в Китай, поэтому я лично был очень рад, когда они сообщили, что все, теперь даже с визой можно не запариваться, просто езжайте. Мы теперь думаем вообще, как увеличивать число поездок и новые направления можно будет вам предложить. А я думаю, чего вам интересного в Китае в новом году наснимать. Кстати, касательно travel-агентства «Пора», мы в этом году не просто добавили больше дат для поездок, появилось новое направление. Можно отправиться в поездку, которая захватывает сразу 2 страны, Камбоджу и Вьетнам. Плюс запустили направление корпоративных туров. То есть, если вы хотите куда-то отправиться со своей командой, устроить такой travel тимбилдинг, пишите. Ссылка... Вы знаете, где ссылка? На месте. Мало того, в ноябре Россия и Саудовская Аравия тоже подписали соглашение о взаимной отмене виз. А если вы счастливый обладатель Шенгена, то теперь по этой визе можете въезжать еще и в Болгарию и в Румынию. Они стали полноценными членами шенгенской зоны. Но тут как бы положительная новость со звездочкой, потому что получение Шенгена для россиян сейчас отдельная задача. Как бы глобально, в принципе, у туризма выдался хороший год. Почти все популярные страны мира в 2025 году отметили уверенный возврат иностранных гостей. Многие там прям на рекордном уровне. Да, удивительно, но только к этому году многие восстановили вот эти доковидные показатели. И не быстро все это восстанавливается. Зато за это время появились новые поводы, собственно, отправиться в путешествие. В Каире наконец достроили и открыли Большой египетский музей. Огромный комплекс, расположенный практически у подножия пирамид. Ну, как бы я немного приукрашиваю, он не настолько близко к пирамидам, но все равно можно даже миновать ужасный трафик в центральной части города. Плюс к этому в Египте была обнаружена первая за 103 года гробница фараона. Это фараон 18-й династии Нового царства Тутмос II. Последнее подобное открытие совершил Говард Картер, раскопавший гробницу знаменитого сейчас на весь мир Тутанхамона. Ну, собственно, он поэтому и знаменит, что его гробница в долине царей сохранилась в запечатанном виде, максимально неразграбленная. В этот раз открытие не такое богато. Археологи изначально даже не понимали, чье захоронение они нашли. Ну, не в лучшем оно состоянии было, но, слушайте, к открытию музея надо было какие-то новинки предоставить, не одним же им там Тутанхамоном жить. Кстати, вот эта экспедиция Говарда Картера, как вы понимаете, по имени была английской. И вот в этот раз гробницу тоже откопала британская египетская археологическая комиссия. То есть в каком-то плане даже спустя 100 лет не получается никак у Египта импортозаместить колонизаторов. Также в этом году после реконструкции наконец-то открылись знаковые здания Мосула на севере Ирака, включая большую мечеть Аль-Нури 12 века с наклонным минаретом. Мосулу очень не повезло, потому что его старый город был практически полностью разрушен во время войны с исламским государством с 14 по 17 года. И вот с тех пор велась большая работа по восстановлению культурного наследия. На реставрацию второго по величине города Ирака ЮНЕСКО выделила 80 миллионов евро. А если вас там не Египет и Ирак интересуют, а все-таки Европа, то в Риме в этом году после реставрации открылся мавзолей Августа и дом золотого потолка Нерона. Французы завершили восстановление Нотр-Дама, пока туда обычных людей не пускают, только всякие специальные мероприятия проводят. Путешествовать можно будет с большим комфортом, потому что открылось несколько крупных международных аэропортов. Во-первых, Тэчо Интернешнл, рядом со столицей Камбоджи Пномпенем. Вьетнам встречает гостей новым аэропортом Лонтхань. Он на юге страны находится, так что думаю его тоже посетить, когда соберусь в Хошимин. Американцы тоже нормально так потратились, 1,5 миллиарда евро на реконструкцию аэропорта Питтсбурга, в 3 миллиарда обошлась первая очередь терминала номер 1 в Сан-Диего и еще 1 300 000 000 за новый аэропорт в Чикаго. В Европе тоже, естественно, работают в этом направлении. Афины запустили проект расширения терминала аэропорта, чтобы у него удвоилась пропускная способность к 30 году. Но если вам не интересны все эти большие аэропорты, забитые туристами достопримечательности, если вам хочется вот просто, чтобы максимально ничего не происходило, то, конечно же, езжайте в Финляндию. Там настолько спокойно, что в июле Хельсинки отметили целый год без единой смертельной аварии на дорогах. В столице Финляндии почти 700 000 человек живут, и они вообще не умирают на дорогах, потому что там развивают пешеходную, велоинфраструктуру, снижают скорость автомобиля в городской черте, то есть работают над этим. Пам-пам. В плане технологий тоже был неплохой год. Ну, понятно, что там новый Samsung или новый iPhone на 10% лучше, чем прошлогодний, и еще новые цвета, ну как бы не того масштаба мы сейчас новости обсуждаем, правильно? А вот компания Valve впервые за долгое время представила свою новую линейку физических устройств. Новый контроллер, шлем виртуальной реальности и перезапуск концепции Steam машин. Небольшие игровые компьютеры. И в каком-то плане можно сказать, что компания так очень аккуратненько ставит свою ножку на ту землю, где обычно властвовали консоли. Такое маленькое устройство, которое подключается к телевизору в гостинице и позволяет ненапряжно играть в игры дома. Вот такие новости уже лучше, интереснее, но надо понять, что это всего лишь анонс. Сами устройства пока что не вышли. Как и разные разработки в сфере квантовых вычислений, квантовых компьютеров. Там Google, Microsoft периодически хвастаются своими достижениями, но это лишь разработки, которые, ну, не скоро еще изменят нашу повседневную жизнь. Чего не скажешь про искусственный интеллект. Тут самая крутая новость, что он все еще нас не поработил. Надеюсь, продолжит в том же духе. Будет дальше рисовать смешные картинки. И елочки на фоне. Да, все обман. Пускай искусственный интеллект поможет дальше совершать открытия в медицине или даже в археологии. Так, в этом году каталог огромных геоглифов на перуанском плато Назка вырос в 2 раза. Нейросеть очень быстро проанализировала все данные там по аэрофотосъемке, спутниковым снимкам и нашла огромное количество вот этих наскальных рисунков древних людей. Почему-то их прикалывало изображать людей и животных, которых видно только с огромной высоты. Ну, то есть это буквально был год ИИ. С этим, я думаю, вы спорить не будете. Какая еще технология показывает такие темпы роста? Год назад невозможно было представить, что по текстовому запросу тебе там и видео нарисуют, которое от реального неотличимо. А сейчас весь YouTube забит фейковыми трейлерами новой части Мстителей. Тут я, конечно, не уверен, хорошо это или плохо. Искусственный интеллект пишет тексты, рисует картинки, снимает видео, пишет музыку, собирает презентации, уже почти научился брать на себя функции агента и выполнять поручения пользователя. Чат-боты на основе больших языковых моделей стали предметом ежедневного пользования огромного числа людей. Давайте проверим это. Алиса, ты согласна, что чат-боты на основе больших языковых моделей стали предметом ежедневного пользования огромного числа людей?
Да, это верно. В России 73% граждан активно используют чат-ботов.
Еще в этом году заработал наземный телескоп обсерватории Веры Рубин, расположенный на горе Серо-Пачон в Чили. В ближайшие 10 лет он будет сканировать все южное небо. И, кстати, вот первые снимки. По расчетам, новая обсерватория за 1 год соберет больше данных, чем все предыдущие телескопы. Потом на основе данных будет построена трехмерная карта космоса, и ее выложат в онлайн, чтобы мы все с вами полюбовались. Телескоп оснащен камерой весом в 3 тонны и с разрешением 3,2 гигапикселя, углом обзора 9,6 квадратных градусов. В данном случае фишка именно в большом поле зрения у этого телескопа и возможности постоянно сканировать небо. Другое перспективное направление на стыке уже технологий и медицины — это нейроинтерфейсы. Да, все эти новости о том, что Илон Маск вживляет в мозги подопытных чипы, это все немного пугает. Не буду это отрицать, но также не надо отрицать, что эти технологии помогут невероятно облегчить жизнь людям, допустим, парализованным. Куда по итогу технология приведет, когда это будет массовое внедрение, это уже в другом видео будем обсуждать. Не с хорошими новостями. Пока давайте вернемся к тому, что китайцы в этом году вышли на новый этап развития подобной технологии. Чип позволяет уже не просто управлять мышкой на экране компьютера. В клинических испытаниях мужчина средних лет с параличом всех конечностей после травмы шейного отдела спинного мозга смог управлять инвалидной коляской на улице и даже отдавать команды своему роботу-собаке, чтобы та ему еды принесла. То есть это уже буквально переход вот с плоского экрана в реальную объемную жизнь, то, для чего эта технология в итоге и будет нужна. Пам-пам! Приятно, что в этом году люди не теряли свои тяги к искусству. Особенно очень богатые люди. Например, в этом году был установлен новый рекорд для работ современных художников. На аукционе в Нью-Йорке вот эта картина Климта ушла за $236,3 миллиона. Всего за 20 минут торгов картина взлетела выше эстимейта в 150 миллионов, и цена добралась до 205 миллионов. Ну а дальше там уже аукцион накинул свои комиссии, сборы, НДС, обязательные взносы в пенсионный фонд и патенты. Так и еще 30 лямов добавилось. Да, это все еще не самая дорогая картина в мире. Этот титул уверенно удерживает спаситель «Спаситель мира» от Леонардо да Винчи. Ее в 2017 году продали аж за 450 миллионов. Климт же установил рекорд в категории самой дорогой картины в истории модернистской неабстрактной живописи с подтвержденной ценой. Не все художники, конечно, могут похвастаться такими доходами, поэтому порадуемся тем, кто работает в Ирландии. После завершения пилотной программы поддержки художников было решено сделать ее постоянной частью социальной политики государства. Представители творческих профессий уже в 2026 году будут получать базовый доход. Просто так им будут давать деньги. За то, что они такие талантливые. Выплаты будут примерно $1500 в месяц. Точные критерии для соискателей пока еще не объявлены. Известно только, что будет ограничение в 2000 мест. Начнутся голодные игры. Потому что художник должен быть голодным. Ну и технически, наверное, следующую новость можно отнести к достижению из сферы искусства. Это рекорд китайского мультфильма «Неджи побеждает царя драконов». Он стал самым кассовым в истории. Еще за первые 2 недели проката картина установила сразу несколько кассовых рекордов. В итоге заработала $1,7 миллиарда, обогнала «Головоломку 2». Там, конечно, сейчас в прокате еще «Зверополис 2» идет, но конкретно в этом году ему таких успехов уже точно не добиться. Он не успеет просто. Я в любом случае считаю, это крутая новость, что таких сборов добился не американский мультфильм. То есть конкуренция, в принципе, полезна даже в творчестве. Пам-пам. Чуть ли не главное спортивное событие в этом году в России — это, конечно же, рекорд Александра Овечкина, хотя он прошел в НХЛ. 26 лет назад канадец Уэйн Грецкий установил свой рекорд — 894 шайбы в регулярных матчах НХЛ. И вот только сейчас он был побит Овечкиным. После чего он триумфально приехал в Россию и установил рекорд по числу рекламных интеграций. Мне кажется, каждый, даже максимально далекий от спорта бренд хотел вот дать Овечкину денежек и погреться в лучах славы его рекорда. После чего хоккеист улетел обратно в Америку ставить новые рекорды, потому что теперь, каждая его новая шайба — это новый рекорд. Пам-пам. Есть еще одна приятная статистика. Экстремальная бедность в мире снизилась с 10,3% в прошлом году до 10,1% в этом. Это выводы Всемирного банка. Крайняя степень бедности — это категория людей, которые живет меньше, чем на $3 в день. Вроде немного снизилась доля, всего 0,2%. Но мы говорим о населении всей планеты, то есть это порядка там, это больше 100 человек точно. Где-то 16 миллионов. Правда, там немного странным образом это произошло, снижение. Всемирный банк, он поменял методологию подсчета за предыдущие года. Они придумали, как лучше понимать число крайне бедных людей в тех странах, где нет полноценной статистики. И из-за этого выросло количество бедных в прошлом, как бы задним числом, но главное, что сама тенденция позитивная. Говоря про деньги, конечно, не забудем порадоваться за Илона Маска, чье состояние теперь оценивают почти в $700 миллиардов. И я не понимаю, почему Всемирный банк до сих пор не сообразил, что на фоне Илона Маска вообще-то мы все крайне бедные люди. Пам-пам. Это были все хорошие новости за год. Если я что-то забыл, дополняйте в комментариях. Получилось ли у меня доказать вам, что это был лучший год? Я подозреваю, что нет. И прекрасно понимаю, что у многих вещей, о которых я сегодня говорил, есть как бы и обратная сторона. Тот же самый искусственный интеллект. Он и добро приносит, и зло. Но подумал, что перед Новым годом можно сфокусироваться только на хорошем. К тому же, кто мне запретит? На этом прощаюсь с вами. Вернусь где-то в середине или конце января, пока с планами особо не определился. Но на других каналах выйдет несколько видео с моим участием, которые уже успели снять. Все буду у себя в Телеграме публиковать. А пока качественно встречайте Новый год, пейте чай, пора заварить, и ловите последний в 2025 году комплимент дня. Я с нетерпением жду 2026 год, ведь там будешь ты. Пам!
Был. Grievous could only be beaten by Obi-Wan. That's really interesting.
General Grievous killed dozens of Jedi during the Clone Wars. Throughout those battles, powerful masters and skilled duelists fell to the cyborg's blades, their lightsabers added to his growing collection. Yet one Jedi's weapon never joined that collection. Obi-Wan Kenobi survived every encounter, not through superior power or luck, because of something built into Grievous from the beginning. When Count Dooku trained the cyborg to kill Jedi, he programmed him around one core assumption. Obi-Wan broke that assumption in 8 specific ways, making him the one opponent Grievous could never be designed to beat. The first reason is foundational. Grievous was built specifically to kill aggressive, attack-first Jedi. In Legends continuity, specifically James Luceno's novel Labyrinth of Evil, the details of Grievous's transformation reveal the scope of his engineering. The banking clan gave him an indestructible body like a Krath war droid. He got 4 mechanical arms, crystal computer circuits, and the ability to tower over most beings. However, the physical changes were only part of making this weapon. The novel shows that the Geonosians had developed ways of changing someone's mind without them ever knowing. Grievous believed he had always been the cold-blooded killer he became. In truth, his cruelty came from intentional programming. The text states specifically that Geonosians arranged for Grievous to be nothing but anger and rage. His original honor and sense of right and wrong were erased completely, replaced by nothing but cold revenge. Dooku found the general easy to train for one specific reason. There was no need to push him toward anger and rage, as the Count had been forced to do with his other students. The training itself was comprehensive. Grievous learned all 7 classical lightsaber forms, studying under a master who knew exactly how Jedi fought because he had once fought beside them. The novel notes that in just weeks, Grievous surpassed any of Tyrannus' previous students. There were moments during combat sessions when even Dooku struggled to match the cyborg. Grievous was designed to kill one type of Jedi with near certainty. Luceno writes that few, if any, Jedi would be able to defeat him. When Count Dooku evaluated Grievous after the general killed the young Jedi, Nadar Veb, the Sith Lord's assessment was telling. Victory over clones and young Jedi was expected, but defeating a Jedi Master was truly worth recognizing. This established the hierarchy that Grievous was built to kill aggressive young Jedi almost every time. The Clone Wars episode Lair of Grievous demonstrates this design in action. When Kit Fisto advises patience after their troops are killed, Nadar Veb responds with wartime thinking. He declares that Grievous will pay for this, that in this war, strength wins, and that the rules have changed. Kit Fisto warns that perhaps Nadar is the one who has changed. When Grievous appears, Nadar charges directly and dies within moments. Meanwhile, Kit Fisto survives by refusing prolonged combat, prioritizing escape over victory. When Grievous threatens to come for him next, Kit simply responds that he will be gone by the time the cyborg arrives. Yoda's assessment afterward reveals the lesson. Nadar tried to answer Grievous's power with his own, exactly the approach Grievous was designed to exploit. But Grievous had a deadly limitation built into his programming. Labyrinth of Evil explains that programming in the 7 classic forms made them deadly opponents, but not unbeatable. While deadly with the forms, they had no understanding of skill beyond that, and could be confused by unpredictability. The novel gives a clear comparison. A professional fighter could be beaten by a cantina brawler who knew nothing about form, but everything about ending a fight quickly. Being locked into forms opens someone to defeat by the unexpected. Count Dooku recognizes this while watching Grievous train. As the cyborg executed his program sequences, Ataru attacks answered by Shi-Cho. Soresu countered with Juyo. Dooku saw the flaw clearly. He could not watch another moment. Grievous was all machine, with no true understanding of combat's deeper principles. The second reason focuses on Grievous's psychological strategy. The cyborg relied on fear before physical victory. The Clone Wars episode Lair of Grievous shows his lair on the 3rd moon of Vasek functioning as a psychological weapon. When Kit Fisto and his team infiltrate the fortress, they discover walls covered with lightsaber trophies from murdered Jedi. The lair serves as a shrine to the cyborg's victories, creating fear before combat even begins. Grievous uses this collection strategically, telling opponents directly that their lightsabers will make a fine addition. The statement appears in multiple encounters, designed to provoke either fear or anger, both of which lead to the aggressive response Grievous requires. Grievous understood Jedi psychology better than most Jedi understood themselves. The Clone Wars episode Grievous Intrigue demonstrates this at its most advanced. After capturing 8th Koth, the cyborg sends a message to the Jedi Council, making his strategy explicit. He does not care about their politics or the Republic. He only lives to see them die. Death will not come easily for Master Koth because Grievous knows prolonged suffering is more painful for the other Jedi watching. When the rescue team arrives, Grievous tells his forces that the Jedi are predictable. Their compassion drove them to rescue Koth exactly as he anticipated. Fear creates hesitation. Hesitation creates predictable defensive reactions. And those reactions feed directly into his programmed combat responses. This leads directly to the third reason. Obi-Wan Kenobi showed consistent psychological immunity to these tactics. Multiple Clone Wars episodes proves this pattern. In Grievous Intrigue, when Grievous tells Kenobi that his lightsabers will make a fine addition to his collection, Obi-Wan shows no fear response. Instead, he maintains a conversational tone and turns the intimidation back on the general. He points out that all the talk gets the cyborg nothing but a futile quest for power, a damaged body, and servitude to Dooku. When Grievous insists defensively that he leads the most powerful droid army the galaxy has ever seen, Obi-Wan calmly observes that it is an army with no loyalty, no spirit, just programming. The general's psychological warfare requires opponents to react emotionally to threats, but Obi-Wan treats him with philosophical curiosity rather than fear. Obi-Wan's emotional control was tested under far worse circumstances than facing Grievous. The Clone Wars episode The Lawless demonstrates this when Darth Maul captures Kenobi and kills Duchess Satine before his eyes. Maul makes his strategy explicit, telling Obi-Wan to let his anger deepen his hatred, that his emotions betray him. The goal is pushing Kenobi toward the dark side through calculated cruelty. Yet, even imprisoned and watching someone he loved pass away, Obi-Wan maintains complete control. He tells Maul that killing him will never destroy him, that only the weak embrace the dark side. When Bo-Katan later frees him, he escapes rather than seeking revenge. If Maul's calculated cruelty could not break Obi-Wan's emotional control, Grievous's intimidation displays had no chance. Building on this psychological foundation, the fourth reason explains Obi-Wan's combat philosophy. He did not fight to win, but to endure and neutralize threats. The Revenge of the Sith novelization by Matthew Stover makes this approach clear. During the opening space battle over Coruscant, Anakin wants to attempt a dangerous maneuver through a narrow gap between enemy ships. Obi-Wan calls it too dangerous and states what he considers the first Jedi rule: survive. Anakin ignores this advice, but the exchange reveals their fundamental difference. Skywalker prioritizes victory and decisive action, while Kenobi prioritizes survival and sustainable outcomes. This philosophy appears consistently in how Obi-Wan handles Grievous throughout the Clone Wars series. In Grievous Intrigue, when the cyborg eventually escapes, Obi-Wan shows no frustration at failing to defeat him personally. Anakin reassures Master Koth that at least they all live to fight another day, echoing Obi-Wan's perspective. While Master Koth states he would have gladly given his life to bring Grievous to justice, Obi-Wan's focus remains on mission success. Everyone survived, Koth was rescued, and the objective was achieved. Whether Grievous was captured or killed remains secondary. The fifth reason reveals the training behind this approach. Obi-Wan's decade-long partnership with Anakin Skywalker prepared him specifically to handle Grievous's overwhelming defense. Both canon and legend sources establish this training effect. The novel Star Wars Brotherhood by Mike Chen describes Anakin as a powerful Jedi with a strong heart and an uncontrollable drive. Kenobi serves as his former Padawan's safety control, making sure Skywalker does not spiral out of control. This relationship required the Jedi Master to constantly manage overwhelming offensive power without being consumed by it. The Clone Wars episode Destroy Malevolence shows this dynamic in action. When Anakin attempts risky maneuvers, his former master responds that spinning is not flying. When the young Jedi proceeds to fly directly at the enemy ship under fire, Kenobi observes that subtlety has never been one of Skywalker's strong points. Anakin claims everything he knows came from Obi-Wan. The response reveals the truth of their relationship, if only that were true. Throughout the series, the Jedi Master maintains overall tactical awareness while his partner executes aggressive moves, successfully covering Skywalker's attacks while maintaining calm during high-speed chaos. The partnership requires Kenobi to defend while Anakin attacks, becoming their automatic coordination. Managing overwhelming offense became Obi-Wan's daily reality for over a decade. The Clone Wars episodes The Citadel, Counterattack, and Citadel Rescue demonstrate this preparation at a larger scale. Kenobi coordinates not just Skywalker's aggressive approach, but also Captain Tarkin's military decisiveness, managing multiple strong personalities with different tactical philosophies while maintaining unity during constant chaos. He cannot rely on overpowering enemies or matching their aggression. The Jedi Master must function effectively despite chaos rather than attempting to control it. Both Anakin and Grievous rely on overwhelming offense that forces opponents into purely reactive positions, expecting their targets to eventually break under sustained pressure. Both channel raw aggression, though Skywalker's comes from passion, while the cyborg's comes from programming. The key difference is that the Jedi possesses the Force and can adapt his attacks through precognition, while the General has only technological speed enhanced through combat algorithms. Labyrinth of Evil shows Grievous recognizing Skywalker as an ideal target. Watching the Jedi pilot during battle, the cyborg observes a warrior unafraid to call on his rage, seeing fearless determination and absolute commitment in the flying. The novel states that the General would like to have Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber hanging from his belt. The cyborg's judgment is correct. The young Jedi's aggressive, emotion-driven style is exactly what Dooku's creation was designed to defeat. The Revenge of the Sith novelization describes Obi-Wan and Anakin as two parts of the same thing. When the cyborg general attacks them on the invisible hand, their coordination is flawless. 1 single second after Grievous began to form the intent to swing, Kenobi and Skywalker stood back to back in the center of the bridge. This coordination came from years of training together. The Jedi Master knew exactly how to defend against overwhelming attack because he practiced it every time he fought beside his former Padawan. The cyborg was simply a mechanical version of what
Okay, can you stop? In terms of calendar. Yeah. I missed today. Missed. Well, tomorrow therefore.
Obi-Wan had been managing for over a decade. However, the 6th reason exposes a critical weakness. Grievous's technological advantages created rigid limitations that the Force could exploit. The Revenge of the Sith novelization documents these weaknesses in detail. The novel describes the cyborg's powered arms as able to move faster than the human eye could see. When he swung his arm, it and his fist, and the lightsaber within it, would literally vanish, erased from existence by sheer, mind-breaking speed. His combat computer programs would analyze even unusual styles, like Mace Windu's Vapad, and respond appropriately after a single exchange. The powered arms let each of the 4 attack 3 times in a single second. Connected by combat algorithms in the Biodroid's electronic network, each of the 12 strikes per second came from a different angle with different speed and strength. This created an unpredictably broken rhythm of cuts, chops, and stabs, with programming advanced enough to make the attacks genuinely random within tactical parameters. Yet, the novel reveals a critical limitation. No human being could move remotely as fast as the General, not even Kenobi, but the Jedi Master didn't have to. In the Force, part of him was Grievous's intent to kill. The surge from intent to action translated to his response without thought. While the intent to swing was still forming in the cyborg's mind, the part of the Force that was Obi-Wan could already sense the coming attack. The General's computer programs might move faster than conscious thought, but they could not move faster than the Force itself flowing through a receptive person.
Come on.
While
one more
Grievous's
set.
algorithms calculated paths and optimal strike sequences, Kenobi simply knew where each attack would land before it arrived. This was not a prediction based on analysis, but a direct perception of reality before it fully manifested in the physical world. Grievous could not sense what Obi-Wan could feel through the Force. Labyrinth of Evil establishes that the cyborg cannot detect Jedi presence through the Force. He relies on scanners and droid reports for awareness, needing visual confirmation and sensor data for information the Jedi Master perceives naturally. Count Dooku himself must inform Grievous when an incoming ship approaches his base, further revealing that the General has no intuitive awareness of threats. The Clone Wars episodes demonstrate this limitation repeatedly. In Destroy Malevolence, when droids report detecting an unauthorized communication, the General must order them to monitor all internal systems to locate Senator Amidala. Anakin and Obi-Wan avoid detection through Force-enhanced stealth, while the cyborg's awareness depends entirely on technological systems. In Grievous Intrigue, he tells his forces to be alert, because where there is Kenobi, they will find Skywalker. This is a logical deduction based on known patterns, not Force sense. When subordinates report that several crafts separated from his ship, the General must receive these reports. He has no independent awareness, creating a stark contrast with Jedi abilities. While Jedi sense presences and tensions and dangers through the Force, Grievous must rely on communication systems that can be disrupted or deceived. The seventh reason demonstrates why Grievous succeeded so often. The Jedi Order's transformation during the Clone Wars created exactly the kind of warriors the cyborg was designed to kill. Multiple canon sources document this decline. The Clone Wars episode Lair of Grievous contains Yoda's clear warning after Nadar Veb's death. To answer power with power is not the Jedi way. In this war, there is a danger of losing who we are. This warning came in response to Nadar's philosophy that in war, strength wins and rules have changed. Kit Fisto had warned that perhaps Nadar was the one who had changed. The young Jedi's death confirmed that the war was transforming how the Jedi approach conflict. The war was changing the Jedi into something they were never meant to be. The novel Star Wars Brotherhood describes lines blurring between the Jedi Order and the military. Mace Windu acknowledges that the scope of the Clone Wars goes beyond peacekeeping tradition, while Obi-Wan recognizes these blurring boundaries himself. In the Legends continuity, Labyrinth of Evil reveals the practical effects. When the Jedi gathered, they discussed military campaigns rather than the Force. New lightsabers were built to handle close combat demands rather than as meditative exercises. The construction process, once a deep spiritual undertaking requiring weeks of meditation, became streamlined to meet wartime needs. Training time shifted from Force study and philosophical development toward combat drills and tactical planning. The Clone Wars episodes The Citadel, Counterattack, and Citadel Rescue show Jedi functioning entirely in military roles. Mission briefings focus on tactics, intelligence, and strategic advantage, with no mention of Force guidance or meditation. Captain Tarkin challenges Jedi methods using military values, stating he reserves his trust for those who take action. Jedi are consistently referred to as General Kenobi and General Skywalker, rather than by their traditional titles, reflecting deeper changes in how they understood their own role. The Jedi Order was abandoning its core principles to win a war. The Clone Wars episodes The Jedi Who Knew Too Much, To Catch a Jedi, and The Wrong Jedi show institutional decline reaching critical levels. When Admiral Tarkin demands that the Senate conduct Ahsoka Tano's trial, Mace Windu's response reveals how political concerns override Force guidance. He tells Obi-Wan that standing with Ahsoka could be seen as opposition to the Senate, prioritizing political appearance over defending their own member. Yoda recognizes they are heading down a dark path, yet the Council proceeds despite his Force-based warning. Even when the Order's wisest master sensed danger through the Force, political considerations took priority over spiritual wisdom. Barriss Offee's testimony exposes what the Order had become. She states that the Jedi are responsible for this war, having lost their way so completely that they have become villains in the conflict. Her attack on the Temple was an attack on what the Jedi have become, an army fighting for the dark side, fallen from the light they once held dear. Whether or not her judgment is entirely correct, it reflects a genuine crisis that even Jedi themselves recognized. Council meetings focused entirely on military and political strategy rather than meditation or contemplation. The vocabulary shifted from spiritual terms to military language. Decisions came from tactical analysis and political calculation rather than Force guidance. Young Jedi like Barriss were raised entirely in this wartime environment, never experiencing what the Order was supposed to be. By the war's final months, the Jedi Order had become something unrecognizable. Generals commanding clone armies, politicians navigating Senate politics, warriors focused on winning battles rather than serving the Force. This was exactly what Grievous had been designed to kill. Young Jedi raised during wartime believed strength won and rules had changed. They saw patience as weakness and restraint as failure. Grievous killed these Jedi with systematic efficiency because every aspect of his programming anticipated exactly how they would fight. Finally, the 8th reason clarifies Obi-Wan's unique position. He was an exception rather than the Order's standard. Both his assignments and his own assessment prove this difference. The Revenge of the Sith novelization establishes the power hierarchy clearly. Yoda fights Darth Sidious because the most powerful Jedi confronts the most powerful Sith. Mace Windu leads the arrest of Palpatine as the Council's champion. When the Council assigns someone to deal with Grievous, Mace specifically recommends sending only one Jedi, Master Kenobi. Anakin objects, pointing out that his former master was not so successful the last time he met the cyborg. This reveals that the Council is not sending their strongest warrior, but their most suitable one. Kenobi's own assessment confirms this. He tells Anakin directly that his former student has become a far greater Jedi than he could ever hope to be. When Yoda later states that Obi-Wan is not strong enough to fight Lord Sidious, it simply acknowledges reality. Obi-Wan's effectiveness came from specialization, not raw power. The Revenge of the Sith novelization explains what made Kenobi uniquely effective through Mace Windu's analysis. Mace observes that his mastery of Soresu, the most defensive lightsaber form, represented an answer to weakness. When Kenobi admits he has never thought of it that way, Mace explains that he is not simply a master of the defensive form. He is the master, singular and unique. Mace delivers critical advice, telling Kenobi to be who he is rather than trying to match the cyborg's strength, because the authenticity is what will ensure Grievous never defeats him. The novel describes Soresu as built on basic deflection principles that all Padawans learn to protect themselves from blaster bolts. Very simple, so restrained and defense-focused that it was nearly passive. Most Jedi learned it, but then moved on to more aggressive styles. Kenobi perfected this form to a degree no other Jedi reached. It was the only form in which he was truly skilled, yet his mastery of the basics was so complete that innovation became unnecessary. The final confrontation on Utapau proved everything about this matchup. The Revenge of the Sith novelization describes the duel in detail. When Grievous attacked at 20 strikes per second, the powered arms created speeds that should have been impossible to counter. Yet Kenobi's blade wove a complex web of angles and curves, never truly fast, but always just fast enough. Each motion subtly interfered with 3, 4, or 8 of the general's strikes.
18 days. I guess
People
I
seem to
don't
think I was
need
born with
to
super strength,
for
but look
more
at me.
right now.
This tiny frame.
Okay, let's go back to... Oh, actually, I shouldn't have quit.
His precise, minimal shifts of weight and stance slipped strikes past by centimeters. This was not about being powerful enough to stop the cyborg, but skilled enough to never be where his strikes landed. The novel explains how this defense worked. That sparkling waterfall of the Force flowed through Obi-Wan, washing away any thought of danger or safety, of winning or losing. While Grievous calculated angles and timing through combat algorithms, Kenobi simply existed in harmony with each moment, responding to threats before they fully appeared in physical reality. Against most opponents, the cyborg's ability to accelerate created a decisive advantage. When he increased the intensity to 16 strikes per second, then 18, most Jedi defenses would begin to fail. The constant mental load of processing multiple attacks from different angles at different speeds became overwhelming. Kenobi's Ceresu avoided this trap entirely. After Grievous increased to 20 strikes per second, the Jedi Master used his defense to attack. A subtle shift in the angle of a single block brought his blade into contact not with an oncoming lightsaber, but with the hand grip. The grip burst into sparks and melted material. The lightsaber fell from the cyborg's hand. This happened 4 times in succession, systematically removing the general's weapons without warning. When lightsaber combat failed, Obi-Wan adapted without hesitation. As Kenobi finally began to lose ground despite perfect Ceresu defense, he lost his lightsaber during the struggle. He immediately seized a Magna Guard's electro staff using the Force. This unorthodox adaptation, switching weapons mid-combat, gave him an advantage the General's programming had not anticipated. Grievous expected Jedi to maintain their traditional weapon throughout the duel, creating a momentary opening that allowed Obi-Wan to seize control. During physical combat, when both had lost their primary weapons, Kenobi ripped open the General's chest plates and exposed his organic heart. The cyborg's biological components were vulnerable in ways his mechanical parts were not. Finally, the Jedi Master used the Force to retrieve a blaster from a fallen droid and fired multiple shots into that weakness. The General's body erupted in flames as his systems failed completely. After killing Grievous in this way, Obi-Wan remarked that it was so uncivilized. This comment reveals everything about why he succeeded. He maintained Jedi values and genuinely preferred elegant solutions, yet had absolutely no ego about methods when survival demanded practical action. The cyborg's programming assumed Jedi would maintain traditional combat approaches because of pride or tradition. Kenobi cared nothing for those assumptions. The complete picture reveals why Grievous could only be beaten by Obi-Wan. The cyborg was built specifically to kill aggressive Jedi who answered power with power. His psychological warfare required emotional reactions that provided predictable responses. His technological advantages created an overwhelming offense that few could survive through conventional defense. The Clone Wars transformed the Jedi Order into exactly the kind of warriors he was designed to kill. Kenobi represented everything the cyborg was not designed to fight. Absolute psychological immunity, survival-first philosophy, a decade of training against overwhelming offense, mastery of defensive Ceresu guided by Force precognition, and willingness to adapt unconventionally. Count Dooku's weapon had every advantage imaginable, but could not account for the one Jedi who simply refused to fight the way his programming expected. That failure of imagination was the gap through which Obi-Wan Kenobi survived every encounter and ultimately ended the threat. While Count Dooku engineered Grievous to be the perfect Jedi killer, his weapon failed against the one master who broke every assumption in its programming. But Dooku's failures extended far beyond his cyborg general. The Sith Lord who trained both Qui-Gon Jinn and Grievous made fatal miscalculations throughout his entire life, from his fall to the dark side to his brutal end at Anakin Skywalker's hands. Then, when Obi-Wan faced Darth Maul, The Sith who eliminated his master, the confrontation tested his emotional control in ways Grievous never could. To understand how Count Dooku's decisions shaped the Clone Wars and why facing Maul became Obi-Wan's greatest emotional test, be sure to watch their full stories next.
Somewhat satisfied. We don't remember if experienced it because it looks alright. For all, I have experienced it. Somewhat dissatisfied. I guess. Ooh, it's an interesting question. I guess somewhat dissatisfied. Neutral. I don't really care about Bungie. I didn't play it. Power creep. Sorry. 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 Didn't. I mean, it could be better. Drive disk. So dissatisfied. Satisfied. Neutral. Neutral. Very dissatisfied on the phone. No comment. No. I guess. The characters are like Hollows. I like Hollows, specifically Hollow Zero. Combat. Hollow exploration experience. Hollow Zero specifically. Best describes my situation. Maybe the fact that I don't like challenging stuff, but I am fine with it in Zone Zero. hard, but not. Four. Pinned messages. Hey yo. Listen what I say. Now listen what I say. Chunky orange tabby. The more I see, the less I know, the more I want to let it go away. Oh, 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 oh.
Hello, Rep 2493 at your service.
Oh god, I didn't build her. She doesn't have the most crit rate.
Hey dear, what kind of fun job have you got me into this time?
Sixes.
Hello, Rep 2493 at your service. Hello, Rep 2493 at your service.
1066. Get lost.
Hello, Rep 2493 at your service.
Nice, Denise. Looks like I'm going to be spending some money on this game. Pretty soon. Still not the most. What? Wow, that's really annoying. So like I need 15 more minutes. That's annoying.
now. Oh God, we're indoors. How is that even possible? No, it's fine. Just keep it rolling. We'll trim it in post. Here we go. Oh, locking it. Now look, I'll be honest. This video was requested by my supporters on Patreon. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, look in the description down below. And was originally going to be about finding which game has the most realistic ice physics. And after falling down the rabbit hole of measuring fictional ice for a whole day and wondering how I could ever possibly explain to people what I do for a living, I discovered the shocking truth. The game with the most realistic ice is all of them? But no, I mean, clearly that can't be right. You're telling me that Mario sliding halfway across the level is realistic? No, you fool, you're a fool. And look, I thought the same thing. I was banking on titling this video, "Why Video Game Ice is Always Bad," or something like that. But I searched game after game after game, and every single time I found nothing but completely reasonable and plausible ice. And I mean, quite frankly, that just doesn't seem possible. You're telling me that nobody screwed it up? This and this and this are all right? Then why does it feel so wrong? I know I'm probably the only one who cares about this. I know I'm driving myself insane because video game ice is too realistic. But I'm too deep down the rabbit hole to pull out now. And I'm dragging you down with me. Richard, hit that intro. Oh, what else? Oh! I gotta get some ice or something. Also, before we start, real quick announcement. Don't click off yet. It's charity stuff. This year, I'm one... Right, so ice can behave very differently depending on the game you're playing, but it generally affects your movement in two distinct ways. It takes longer to speed up and longer to slow down. To see how realistic this is, maybe it's best to start with a simple question. Why is ice slippery? Well, it all has to do with friction, a force that we experience every day. But it's kind of weird when you think about it. Like, if you pick up a glass of water, there's nothing here below it, and yet some magical force is keeping it up? Witchcraft! Well, that's because no surface is perfectly smooth. If you zoom in far enough, every single surface has some imperfections, little peaks and divots that collide with one another as the objects move. Each collision dissipates a little bit of energy from the moving object, causing it to slow down and eventually stop. The rougher the surfaces are, the more collisions will occur, slowing the object down faster and faster. The reason ice is so slippery is because it was once water, which can flow and always lay perfectly flat. When it freezes solid, it gains a hard, crystalline structure that lets it maintain this smoothness, so even relatively rough surfaces will slide across it easily. And now I promise this is all very important to the video game ice mystery, because now that we know what causes friction, we can start to quantify the slipperiness of ice. And hey, while we're at it, if you happen to be taking a physics class right now, you're welcome, because I'm about to help you ace your next test. The force of friction is equal to the normal force times the coefficient of friction. To see what the heck any of this means, let's take a look at a simple example of a block moving across a flat surface. We know that the force of friction is acting in the opposite direction of motion, which is why the block slows down. But what other forces are acting on this object? Well, obviously, if the cube is on Earth, then the force of gravity must be acting on it. Any force is equal to an object's mass times its acceleration. And here on Earth, the acceleration due to gravity is equal to a constant 9.8 meters per second squared. So we know the force of gravity is trying to push the cube down. But there's actually a third force here. You've probably heard the expression, every action has an equal but opposite reaction. That's one of Newton's laws of motion and explains why gravity doesn't just push the cube down through the face of the Earth. If gravity is pushing the cube down, then the floor must be pushing the cube back up in response. This is called the normal force. Now, if this plane were tilted, things get a little more complicated and you need to bust out some trigonometry, but if we assume that the surface is completely flat, then our normal force is exactly the same as the force of gravity, just pointed in the opposite direction, which means that the force of friction on this cube is proportional to its mass times 9.8. And since friction is proportional to the normal force, we can go ahead and plug that right into our formula. Now, the coefficient of friction is essentially a measure of the roughness that we talked about earlier, and you can look up all sorts of tables to find the coefficient of friction between different materials. Tire on asphalt has a coefficient of about 0.72, skin on skin is 0.25, and most importantly for today's video, the sole of a shoe on ice has a coefficient of friction of around 0.05 to 0.1, depending on the type of shoe you're wearing. So, in order for a video game's ice to be considered realistic, its coefficient of friction must lie within this range. But how do we go about finding that? Well, we know that our force of friction is equal to this. And we know that any force is equal to a mass times an acceleration. This m represents the mass, which means these other two must be our acceleration. And acceleration is equal to a change in speed over time. So if you run really fast and then start sliding on some ice and measure the time it took to go from whatever speed you started at to 0, you could calculate your negative acceleration. So if we plug in our acceleration into this formula, then rearrange it to solve for the coefficient, we have a nice and simple way to calculate how realistic any given patch of ice is. All I had to do was find an object of a known height to get a scale for the world, measure the character's initial velocity before the slide, and record the total time it took to reach a complete stop. And then, of course, we need to calculate the acceleration due to gravity in each and every one of these games, since they don't take place here on Earth. And I had to do that for every game that I tested. And every single time, I got a coefficient of friction that was squarely within this very small range. Super Mario Galaxy was close to being too slippery, but with a value of 0.55, it's still within the range for both shoes on ice and ice on ice if you got a power-up. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, technically speaking, the regular ice in Minecraft is a bit outside this range, with a value of 0.17, about the equivalent of rubbing nickel on mild steel. I don't know why I thought that would be like a good comparison. A better example might be a rubber-soled hiking boot on ice. And I mean, Steve's a pretty outdoorsy guy. He might have some pretty good boots on. And the other two types of ice were perfectly within the normal range, regardless of the shoe. And while we're on the subject, what about the old Minecraft ice boat trick? Surely sliding for a fifth of a mile on blue ice strains credulity a bit. And you know what? You're right. With a coefficient of 0.03, it would be outside the range for a shoe on ice. But perfectly in the range for a hard wood on ice. Mojang, you dirty dogs with your scientific accuracy, how'd you do it? And while we're talking about vehicles, Mario Kart was obviously going to vary a bit depending on the type of car you had, so I tried my best to get one as realistic as possible, with Toad driving a Mercedes with standard tires. Because Toad is non-negotiable. And guess what? 0.182. Perfectly in range for a tire on an icy road. It doesn't matter the material, it doesn't matter the game, every time these game devs are absolutely nailing it. How? So what's going on here? Does every game studio have an ice physicist on hand, making sure the plumber that eats shrooms to double in size slides realistically? If so, I mean, who's hiring? Do these people just instinctively know how slippery ice should be? Is it just dumb luck? Those aren't rhetorical questions, by the way. I want to know. Game designers, spill your secrets to me. Let me know about the ice physicists. Of the 9 ices that I tested, 12 if you count Minecraft walking versus boats, 11 of them had ice that was at least pretty close to real-life ice. The one that failed, by the way, was Pokemon, where you just slide forever until you hit something, giving it a coefficient of friction of 0, which is physically impossible and could allow you to break the laws of thermodynamics and create a perpetual motion machine with infinite energy. So I feel like maybe that one shouldn't count. However, I do think I know why ice in games feels so unrealistic. Because clearly, if I run as fast as I can and slide on a frozen lake, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't slide as far as Mario. I mean, I'm not sure, I haven't tested it yet, but that's because I'm not running as fast as Mario. What I found time and time again is that video game characters run really fast. 2D Mario runs at 15 miles per hour, over twice as fast as your average Joe. Link is even faster than that, and they don't call them blue ice highways for nothing, because Steve in a boat can get himself a ticket at 87.9 miles per hour, or 140 kilometers per hour. And that, folks, is why you drive slow in the winter, especially if your car is a wooden boat. All of these characters slide further than you'd expect, because they're moving faster than you'd expect. Based on our formula, if the friction remains the same, a faster initial speed will require a longer time to decelerate from. Video game worlds also tend to have gravity that is way stronger than Earth's, by 3 to 6 times. Basically, the physics of video games are always exaggerated to make them feel snappier and more fun. I don't got time to jog around Hyrule or slowly plummet to my doom. I got places to be. I'm coming down. So if the starting speed is a little too high and the gravity is a little too high, maybe they just sort of accidentally cancel each other out, and you wind up with ice that is technically realistic, even though everything around it is not. Or, I only tested a couple of games, so it is possible that there's more out there where you slide way too much, or God forbid, not enough. But, hey, now that you know how to measure it yourself, you can go see how realistic the ice in your favorite game is, and let me know in the comments down below. I'm curious to see. So, there you have it.
I never really thought about this, even though my morning cold brew is basically load-bearing at this point, but how exactly does this coffee help me wake up in the morning? I know it comes down to this critical chemical caffeine, but at the molecular level, what is this little nub doing to make me feel more alert? Is this an energy source, or is it something weirder? The answers here can take us in some wild directions, from the delicate balance of competing signals in your brain to the dark depths of what potentially makes our metabolism kind of dangerous. So I'm not going to waste any time. Slam a shot of espresso and let's take a quick look into the pharmacology of how caffeine perks you up. And hey, welcome back to Clockwork, a show about the chemistry powering your foundations. Subscribe if you want a better understanding of how your chemistry roots you to the world, and check out our community on Patreon to see our latest sticker packs and papercraft molecules and all the cool stuff we're cooking up over there. But anyway, in order to understand how caffeine works, it's best to see it first. So let's take a proper look at caffeine the molecule real quick. Caffeine is incredibly well studied, with it first being properly identified all the way back in the 19th century. So there's dozens of different ways to describe this goofy little wedge, but for now I'm going to focus on the fact that caffeine is a purine, which is any molecule that kind of has this shape, which is a little hexagon glued to a little pentagon, which is as far away from a technical definition of purine as you can get, but that's what I'm rolling with for now. And maybe that purine label sounds familiar. If not, let's compare caffeine to an equally famous purine. This fella is adenosine, and trust me, you know this one. Slap a ribose sugar and 3 phosphates on that purine base, and heck, you've got adenosine triphosphate, ATP, the ubiquitous energy currency your cells produce to basically make everything work. Cool. Actually, you know what, maybe that's not as famous as I thought it was going to be. So while we're looking at it this way, here's one of my favorite facts in all of biology. Take 2 phosphates off here and then chain this adenosine together with a bunch of guanine, cytosine, and uracil, and that's RNA. Heck, you know what, mess with that ribose sugar a little bit, turning it into deoxyribose, and it turns out that adenosine is adenine, the letter A in your DNA. I'll never stop gushing about that. Your cellular energy currency is just repurposed RNA letters. Biochemistry is so good at so many things, but one of the most incredible is how willing life is to just repurpose every single thing in its toolkit whenever it can. But anyway, let's get back on track and look at our adenosine-caffeine comparison. That similarity between caffeine and adenosine, that almost feels like an answer to our question, right? Caffeine is similar to our energy currency, and I feel more awake and energized after consuming caffeine, so are my cells somehow using caffeine as a kind of spare energy currency? No, not even close. But this connection to adenosine is actually really important. So let's get into the real reason caffeine gives you that buzz. To do this, we'll have to dive a little bit into neurology, but I'm going to keep this very surface level because neuroscience can get incredibly complicated incredibly quick. Caffeine's most powerful effect comes from how it binds to this receptor, the A2AR adenosine receptor. A2A is a little protein switch that sits on the surface of tons of different cell types throughout your body. The business end of A2A is this little pocket embedded in the cell membrane. And this receptor's job is simple. When a specific molecule on the outside of a cell binds here, its shape will change just enough to relay a message inside the cell. Specifically, A2AR is a special class of protein called a GPCR, a G protein coupled receptor. I did a whole primer about how they work a while back in my video on vision, so just go ahead and check that out if you want more information on the fundamentals of GPCRs here. Anyway, caffeine is specifically an antagonist of these A2A receptors, meaning that it gets jammed in this binding pocket without turning on the little switch. Caffeine is the perfect shape to actually get stuck in here for a while, so drinking caffeine basically blocks the signal this switch usually sends. But of course that unlocks a bigger question. What exactly exactly are we blocking here by drinking coffee or tea? You know what, I figure the name gives it away a little, but A2A receptors get properly activated by, you guessed it, adenosine. And that's going to get us to the way more interesting question. Why on earth is our energy currency and literally a piece of our RNA code also a messenger molecule? And gosh folks, I love this bit. Let's very briefly touch on your metabolism so we have everything we need to understand what caffeine is blocking here. Okay, so maybe you know this already, but being alive is difficult. Our superpower as eukaryotes comes down to how much energy our mitochondria can process, making smaller and less dense prokaryotes come off as positively sluggish. All day, your mitochondria are converting food energy into this ATP currency, using the oxygen you breathe as the final link in something called the electron transport chain. And again, I'm shaving off a bunch of critical details here, but it turns out that this chemical engine isn't perfect. Things can run hot after a while. And if your cells are forced to perform at a high level all the time, things tend to break down. Your mitochondria can end up leaking all sorts of toxic byproducts if they're pushed too hard. Things like reactive oxygen species and other nasty bits that can damage DNA and otherwise blow up your cells. And this is why some teams are publishing research that kind of convincingly illustrates how our mitochondria are the main reason that we, and most other animals, have a sleep drive in the first place. We need a guaranteed period during the day where we're basically doing nothing so we can keep our powerhouses from running too hot. You know, give those mitochondria a break, if I can oversimplify things even further. And therefore, we get that sleep drive mostly from the cells in our body that use the most energy. Can you guess which ones those are, by the way? Yes, exactly. It's your brain, your nerve tissue. Despite only making up 2% of your body weight on average, your brain consumes around 25% of your daily energy output. Life is hard, but consciousness is much harder. And that's enough context for us to bring this back to our sleep signal. But first, let's hear a quick commercial segment. This episode of Clockwork has been made in support of Keats & Co., the coffee and tea powerhouse over at Good.Store. If this video...
Yay! This. This happens a bit over after 1 AM, I guess.
Makes you want to experience these pharmacological effects of caffeine firsthand? Keats & Co. has the highest possible quality coffee and tea ready for you to try. The team at Keats & Co. partners with local initiatives in the areas they source their raw ingredients to ensure fair compensation for workers, sustainable farming practices, and environmental protection. And the best part is, the profit from Keats & Co. directly funds tuberculosis treatment programs in Lesotho, so you can get that buzz while sticking it to humanity's most ancient enemy and predator. Support the channel by visiting keats.watchclockwork.com. My personal favorite product of theirs is the light roast Calypso coffee, which is great for pour over, but you really can't go wrong with any of their products. But anyway, let's get back to the video. So, throughout the day, the mitochondria in these neurons are constantly pumping out ATP to power all that brain business. ATP moves energy around by breaking a phosphate group off and becoming adenosine diphosphate. And there are mechanisms in place to further break ADP into raw adenosine, utterly phosphate-free. So there is actually raw adenosine floating around in your cells as well throughout the day. And throughout the day, that spent adenosine starts to build up inside your neurons. In a perfectly efficient system, ATP would get produced, broken down into ADP or raw adenosine, and then get brought back to the mitochondria to get re-energized. However, no cell is a perfect system, so spent adenosine can't help but accumulate throughout the day. Neurons respond to this by pumping that less energized adenosine into the extracellular space outside their membrane. And this eventually becomes one of the many sleep signals that help set and reinforce your circadian rhythm. As raw adenosine builds up in the fluid between your superactive neurons, it will reach a barrier region in one of the core parts of your brain, the shell surrounding the nucleus accumbens. Here we have a concentration of branching neurons that are absolutely covered with those A2A adenosine receptors. These fellas have a bunch of different jobs, but the one we care about is the role regulating certain groups of neurons, making them more or less active. When adenosine finally reaches this region, they'll bind to these A2A receptors and activate a big signaling cascade that basically turns off your awake system in your brain. And feel free to skip this next bit if you don't want to get too deep into the biochem, by the way. This is all pretty indirect, but basically the activated A2A system will turn on this pump, GAT1, which will then vacuum up as much of this neurotransmitter, GABA, as it can. To, again, really oversimplify this, the GABA in your central nervous system helps keep your various arousal neurons active, while lowering GABA levels allows neurons in charge of your sleep system to take over. These two systems, your awake and your sleep signal, are basically in a chemical wrestling match all day, where your awake centers receptors inhibit your sleep centers until a switch like these A2A receptors push the sleep system into dominance, you know, making you tired and fall asleep. Therefore, your daily energy burn gradually increases this sleep signal as more and more adenosine binds to more and more adenosine receptors, which is why it's important that caffeine is kind of a similar shape to adenosine. By jamming up these A2A receptors, your coffee or tea blocks the sleep signal, which in turn promotes the alertness signal already being received by your arousal neurons. And that's the main game caffeine is playing. It doesn't quote-unquote give you energy, it simply tips the delicate balance of signals in your brain towards feeling more alert and more awake, and frankly more awesome. That's why coffee wakes you up in the morning too. It jumpstarts your awake neurons, which automatically inhibit.
Okay. That's going to be it for the stream. Good luck